4 days after the Dallas Cowboys don't show up in Kansas City, we are back for the Irish NFL show Thanksgiving special. Well, 3 days is Wednesday night. I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Hope you enjoy the football tomorrow night. We have got a stacked show. We don't only have two Super Bowl champions, Traina from Sports Illustrated, Slater from NFL Network. We have the last face that we see before we go to bed on a Thursday night, the host of Thursday Night Kickoff on NFL Network for us. Late night football, Colleen Wolfe. We are delighted to welcome you in, Colleen. Welcome to the Irish NFL show. How's it going?
You guys, thank you so much for having me on. This is so wonderful. As someone who is named Colleen, I feel like it's only right for me to be on the show.
Absolutely. And look, it's an honor to have you on. Great to have you on as the first guest tonight as well, Colleen. And look, we ask everybody this. Do you have any Irish heritage? Have you ever been to Ireland before?
I have been to Ireland. Both of my parents are Irish. And in fact, when I went, my dad and my uncle thought it would be a really good idea to go to my mom's hometown and just like stop at a local gas station and be like, oh, do you know where the Gaynards live? And they were like, oh yeah, like right up the street, just like go here, turn there. So we showed up unannounced with like two carfuls of family members. And then my dad and my uncle went and knocked on their door and we're like, hey, we're your cousins from America. So not only was I like, oh my God, please don't do that. Like this, we can't just show up unannounced. They were so awesome. They let us in, made us lunch, and then rolled out a family tree for us to sign. So yeah, I've been to Ireland and it was great. Loved it.
That sounds like a totally Irish story. I've had that happen with American cousins that I have, Colleen, and who've come over, rang the doorbell, announced themselves. So it's certainly not.
Wait, are you serious?
Yeah, genuinely, my cousin from San Francisco did just the exact same thing. So it's not uncommon, and but if you'll have to come back, and you got extra tour guides now to show you around the different parts of the country. Michael is up north. I can show you around Cork and Kerry, but we're delighted to have you. And obviously with the connection, we all know about your great affiliation, your hometown Philadelphia. It's a city I spent a summer in myself working on a Habitat for Humanity project, living on Diamond Street.
Oh no way! Wow,
yeah.
Diamond Street is no joke.
No, it's no joke. It was, for a 17-year-old from rural Ireland, that was an eye-opening experience. But I hold Philly dear to my heart even since then. I had 4 months in the city. It was fantastic, and but we know your love of Philly. We know your love of the Eagles. It's been an interesting year for them, and I suppose Jalen Hurts is a quarterback who divides opinions even on this show. Interested in, for our viewers, interested in, I suppose, hearing your thoughts on the Eagles this year and on Hurts and Sirianni.
Okay, so before I get into the Eagles, I feel like I need to apologize on behalf of all Americans that are just randomly showing up at your door. Like, that's not okay behavior. And I had no idea that other people were doing this as well. I thought it was just my family. So my apologies. And if I do ever make it over there again, which I really hope I do, I will definitely hit you guys up. So you have a fair warning. I won't just show up at my house with all of my cousins and aunts and uncles, like total weirdos. Also, the fact that you were in Philly on Diamond Street, like for people who don't know, you were in North Philly on Diamond Street, right? Okay, yeah, for people who don't know, that is a very serious part of the city. And I one time had gotten lost there, and I was very nervous. So that is a very interesting spot to land in, coming over from Ireland, not knowing the city at all. So I feel like you probably learned a lot very quick there. No question about it. So Philadelphia, as you guys know, we love our team. We are ride or die with our team unless they're losing. And then we're like, oh, we're going to off someone if it's not ourselves, as we keep watching them. But it's been a really weird, interesting year for the Eagles, especially with this new coaching staff that came in and Nick Sirianni, because he is an acquired taste, I think, for a lot of people. And his press conferences are highly entertaining. He says a lot of things that we can go back and laugh about and bring up. I mean, he gives us amazing material for all of our shows, which is why I love him. The week that he was talking about flowers growing and making sure that like the soil is good for roots to grow. And then he kind of got a little off track. And so looks like it's going well though. And that there are flowers popping up out of that soil now, because the team has slowly started to come together. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that it started to come together when they finally started to run the ball, which if Nick Sirianni listened to Sports Talk Radio in Philadelphia, he would have learned this way earlier in the year, because everyone has been telling them that they need to run the ball. When we did Thursday Night Football there, when the Eagles played the Bucks, there were constant chants about run the ball. There were poor kids that were left after the game, after the Eagles lost, just still holding their run the ball signs, clutching them. So to see the Eagles doing that and to see them having success, it warms my heart. Also, I think it's really interesting that just the schedule quirk that they have, that they don't have to fly again the rest of the year. They don't have to go to an airport, which is incredible. As someone who goes to an airport week in, week out, I have off this week. I'm so happy about it. There's a lot of things a lot of problems that you run into. And Hudson News, Newport News, no, it's Hudson News. I mean, honestly, they would go out of business if I wasn't in an airport every week. So I think that that's a huge, huge bonus for the Eagles. The fact that they're home, they finally got a home win. So they should feel really happy about that. And I think that they could really sneak into the wild card spot, which is something that I did not see coming.
Colleen, over the past year, we've been very fortunate to interview a number of your colleagues at NFL Network, and they all always bring some great stories. Tom Paracello told us about the fact on free agency week, he was doing the show without any trousers on, and unique stories like that. Have you got anything you want to share from your years?
I am wearing pants right now, so I hate to disappoint. Tom P definitely one-upped me there, but it's such a fun place to work. I never really dreamed that I would be able to get the job when I went out, I auditioned, and I was like, wait a second, you want to fly me out to Los Angeles to audition for a job just talking about the NFL on a national level? I was like, yeah, okay, cool, no problem. So I went out and treated it like I had never been to Los Angeles before. I told my husband, take off work, let's make a trip out of it. We rented a car, we went out a day early, we went on a little bar crawl, which is a smart thing to do before an audition. But you got to stay loose, guys. And so I showed up for the audition a little hungover, not going to lie, but I thought I bombed, and I guess I didn't. So I got the job. And ever since then, there have just been so many amazing people that I've met, and doing Thursday Night Football with Steve Smith Sr. and Michael Irvin and Joe Thomas, they are brothers to me. I feel like I have just such an incredible family there. And there's so many stories that I'm not even sure I can just pinpoint one, because it's I feel like it's the news cycle in my brain just refreshes and I forget about what just happened. But meeting some of the people that I've met there has just been the best part of the job.
Colleen, sure, if we didn't know you were Irish parents beforehand, turning up a little bit hungover to a job interview would have sealed it, definitely, in relation to it. and I want to add, just for Tom Pelissero's kind of good name around NFL Network, he shared that he was having a shower when one story broke, and therefore he just had time to put a shirt on and underpants. He didn't have his trousers on. It isn't that he's sitting there during free agency with no pants on generally, just to clarify. Exactly.
Well, also it's when we're working from home and the camera shot is just our torso up. I mean, I've done half of my shows in sweatpants and it's very comfortable. I'll have a blouse up top, and sometimes I don't even do my hair in the back. I'll just curl the sides and let it ride. And then if I happen to turn around, everyone's like, what is going on back there? I literally just wake up.
But Colleen, you kind of alluded to your time in the NFL Network. You've done it on all sides of the camera. I mean, you've been a producer, you've been an analyst, you've been a writer, you did a lot in the production side. And now you've got this role. I want to say it's like herding cats. I mean, there's a great Latin expression, qui custode ipsus custodes, who watches the watchmen. And you as host have to rein in all of these, magnetic personalities. I think of Ernie doing Inside the NBA, and he's got Shaq and Charles Barkley. I mean, you've got Steve Smith and Michael Irvin, which is a bit of or Irwin, which is a similar combination. How do you find that on the Thursday? Just trying to rein them in and keep them contained, because Michael Irvin the other week was talking at Bill Belichick. There wasn't a conversation back. He was just talking at him, basically.
Right. Yeah, that's usually how it goes. I was actually thinking about reaching out to Ernie Johnson and being like, what do you have any tips for me here? But it's in all honesty, I feel like I thrive in an atmosphere of chaos. Like, I would much rather do a show like that with those personalities on that stage than to do something that is not live in a controlled environment with people who are going to just stay in their lanes, because that's really boring to me. I love the element of surprise, and it is just like a whole bag of surprises with those guys on Thursdays. And you never know what you're going to, even last week we had some crazy fans like cursing and screaming and trying to fight Kyle Van Noy or something. And there's so many things that happen. I'm just like, all right. So my dad is an air traffic controller, and I think about it like that sometimes, because everyone in our family is like a little ADD. But if we have like 10,000 things that are thrown at us at once, then we can actually sustain way better if we as opposed to just having like a couple things to deal with. So it's a really interesting job, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. I kind of got thrown in, and my first show I ever did on the road, it was in Cincinnati, and Steve Smith and Irv had never really worked together before, and they did not get along in the beginning, and that was real. And we have come such a long way from that. The two of them genuinely like each other, and it's been a really beautiful thing to watch the two of them kind of figure each other out, and then our show to kind of figure out where everybody should be, and the voices on the show and the characters on the show, because they're not far from how they are in real life at all. So it's a really weird, fun show to do. I love it.
And being serious here now, when we're watching the show on the Thursday night, you can see that progression. We're sitting there, it's maybe midnight, 12:30, and it's that good that I'm like, I should stay up here. I should stay up. But if I stay up, it's 4 a.m. And, it's good. It's really, really good. I'm really, really enjoying it. I want to take you back to something that's very, very positive for at least a few of us in this chat, maybe apart from you, Brian, as a Giants fan, talking about Philly, talking about your background, your love for Philly and the Eagles. As a Broncos fan, I was pulling big time for you to beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. But how was that year for you? That game, it was almost like watching Rocky. It was like Rocky 7. Adrian moment whenever Brady had the ball with 5 seconds to go. I was like a 12-year-old kid going nuts. Please, God, please. I was buzzing for the Eagles, and I'm not an Eagles fan in case everyone's thinking, but just delighted for the city of Philadelphia, which is a great city as well.
I love, you know what, guys, I can come on anytime. I mean, if this is how the shows usually go, I love it. I'm always available. That year was really surreal because I always set the bar extremely low. And then that way I'm not disappointed ever. And, if anything, I'm surprised. And it's wonderful if things don't turn out terrible. And so I usually think the Eagles are going to be awful every single year. And even that year when they were so successful with Carson Wentz and he was in the MVP conversation, and then he had the game against the Rams where he got hurt. And so it was like everything came crashing back down because I had started to sort of let myself believe in the Eagles at that point. And then I remember I was like, oh, okay, cool. That's of course that's going to happen. So what, you're telling me that Nick Foles is going to come in and make a run with this team? And that's exactly what happened. And it was so wild because I remember that NFC Championship game against the Vikings, and the Vikings defense was so good that year, and they just did not show up. And I thought that was going to be the most difficult game for them. And they won a bunch of different ways in the playoffs that year. It wasn't all the same recipe. And Doug Peterson did such a good job putting Nick Foles in a spot to succeed. And I remember, of course, the Eagles go to the Super Bowl and it's in Minneapolis in the winter. Like, it is freezing. It was so cold there. So, it's not like we're in Miami or like New Orleans, but that's okay. I'll take it. No big deal. So I remember going, and that day I was able to do the pregame show for the Super Bowl, which was so cool in and of itself, because I just was able to like kick back. And Mike Garafolo, who I do a lot of the shows with, he's also from Philly, but he's a reporter, and so he won't like really lean into it as much as I do. And so it was great. I could be a homer all morning long. And then I remember walking to the stadium and being on the field and seeing the Patriots warm up, and then also being by the Eagles bench. And there was just this like weird buzz. And you could tell that the Eagles players were just so much looser than the Patriots. And it was almost like they had already won the game. And I never think like that ever. But I was like, I think I could feel it. Like, I think they're going to win. And then watching them with the Philly special, the whole bit, like it was such an amazing experience. And it was so much fun. And then when the Eagles finally won, there were a bunch of Eagles fans around us. And, my best friend was with us, and she was FaceTiming her family crying. And like, it was great. And I still have a ton of confetti that I haven't done anything yet. It's just like in Ziplocs. And sometimes I'll reach into like a weird pouch in my suitcase and like pull out some confetti from then. But if you haven't experienced it with your team yet, hopefully you get to. It's just an experience that's unlike anything else.
And my wife is actually from Minnesota, so I can attest to those cold winters.
Oh,
Isn't that stadium something else?
I love it. I love that stadium. And they do a really good job with like all of their pregame stuff. And in terms of stadiums that are enclosed or just that have roofs, that's one of the nicer ones. That one doesn't feel like it's dark and inside. It has this, somehow they've been able to kind of get that same feeling like you're outside. It's a huge stadium too. It's honestly, I'm not blowing smoke, it's one of my favorite places to watch a game, because the fans, they come out in huge numbers. It's not like a lot of stadiums we've been to, because it's like, people are working, they have jobs on Thursdays, so they're not always at the games right away. And that it doesn't matter in Minneapolis, they show up and that place is packed.
And just before my question, Colleen, it would be remiss of me not to ask, because I know our viewers will have seen your dog come in and out a little bit. What is your dog's name? Because we will have viewers who will have seen it and will want to know.
Okay, so I don't know which. I have two running around here. Their names are Dasher and Blitzen. They really love the holiday season. I think that was Dasher who came through, though.
I'm intrigued to know around, because like on this show, you make your picks every week. And in terms of you were the lone wolf who went for the Washington football team this week. But how do you decide on making your picks? Is it a gut thing, or what's your process?
It's agonizing. I spend way too much time doing. In fact, I was supposed to get my picks in 2 hours ago, and I just remembered that I haven't done it yet. And so that's the next thing I have to do right after the show. And it's such a process. And honestly, it's like, okay, yeah, it's a 50-50 shot that you're going to get it, but I'm very competitive, and I'm competitive with myself. And so I will be my husband, every week, he has to hear me be like, no, I should have taken the Colts. I knew Jonathan Taylor was going to go off this week. What? So it's a whole thing, but I usually, so it's tough because we usually are making picks, at least for the website, the ones that are on YouTube. We're doing those on Tuesday, and it's agonizing for me because the injury reports aren't like, you just don't know who's going to be available. You don't know who's still going to be limited, or if somebody pops up late on the injury report. That's Dasher running in the kitchen now. So I always look at injuries, and then I always try and look at matchups too, like in terms of pass rushes and offensive lines. And then obviously like home, away, I'm looking at weather reports. I mean, I'm putting like way too much time into this, but it's all of that makes a difference. And every time we talk about games on our weekend show for Good Morning Football Weekend. It's not just like, okay, cool, let me talk about Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce because they're awesome. It's like, well, I want to make sure that there's a reason I'm bringing them up. And usually it's because someone is injured on the other side or someone is coming back, making their debut or whatever it is. Those are the things that I find really interesting. And then I have to go down like 17 different rabbit holes to like find out information and text people and whatever else. But there's just so many things I feel like that go into it.
Colleen, at the London games, we were fortunate to have media passes for both games. Are you taken back by, I suppose, the explosion over the last decade of NFL across Europe, and obviously next year now with the German games coming as well?
Oh my gosh. So I've already been like, can I please go to the Germany game? I have not been able to go to any of the London games yet. And I love London. I studied abroad there. It's always a fun place to go. And it's a good spot to like a jumping off point from coming from here and then anywhere else I want to go. So not that I travel that much, but I just really like London. So I'm really trying to get over to one of the international games because they look like such a blast on television. I'm usually have to anchor the coverage in studio, but it looks really cool to see everyone in the stands wearing different jerseys and everyone's getting along, it seems. And that's not the case usually over here. You're not going to go to a game and have like 17 different teams represented in one row. And I feel like that's something that's really unique about the games over there. I'm really dying to go to the Germany one, like no question. So maybe I'll see you there.
You anchored the London game between the Jets and the Falcons. We were it was great to meet, and she was very kind. Melissa Stark before the game. That must have been what, like 4 a.m. your time, that game? Like I can't even remember now. 6 a.m. maybe?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, you guys, it's like 10 o'clock for you at night for you guys right now, right?
Yeah.
20 past 10. Yeah.
So it's like, okay, for like 1 week out of the whole season, I had to get up really early. Like it's not that bad for me. It sucks for you guys. You guys are very loyal. But that game, I think I left my house at like I think I got up at 11 o'clock at night and then left around like 1 because then like we got to do mic checks and all that other stuff. But we were live on the air at like 4 a.m. for that game. That was the game that Kyle Pitts finally went off.
Yeah,
he did.
Good one.
Colleen, you were absolutely right. The atmosphere at London games with the different jerseys is amazing. I mean, this year we saw more Texans jerseys there than we did Broncos, for example, which hurt some of the people on the show more than me. But it's always good to see if you like, you see the jerseys of like, well, who's wearing what? And the thing in relation to throwback jerseys or particular players that you see a proliferation of. More than a few Mac Jones and Daniel Jones jerseys, which start to get interesting and confusing. But on a slightly more serious note, I think everybody's probably seen an infamous video, or kind of infamous video, with you back in 2017 with Marshawn Lynch, where he propositioned you live on camera. He asked you out, and then he noticed your wedding ring. And in a very way, I mean, that was quite funny. It was quite innocuous and quite sweet. But on a serious note, there have been challenges, obviously, with the diversity challenges in the NFL, with female journalists getting suitable access. You can think back to the inner science issues with Brett Favre as a classic example. But now, fast forward a reasonably short period of time, as we're alluding to, like you host our Thursday nights in relation to it. You've got great people like Laura Rutledge. You've got Kay Adams on Good Morning Football. You've got Carissa Thompson, obviously, over in Fox. The list goes on with Lindsay Jones from The Athletic, amazing journalists like Mina Kimes. The list literally goes on. To us as casual fans who aren't obviously in the media in the US there on a daily basis, it seems like a step change has been taken. I'm just wondering about your perspective on, do you really think that evolution in terms of diversity and access has been broken, or is there still more to be done?
There's always going to be more that needs to be done, but I do think that we've made some good strides just looking around. And you mentioned so many of the amazing women that work just in the NFL, but just in sports in general. And I think that as more faces are represented and more voices are heard from, it becomes easier for people to realize, oh, it's okay. Like, wow, women, they also like sports, and wow, women can also like do things. It's kind of crazy, but it's like there's so many stereotypes that we have to fight all the time, and that's never going to change. But for me to be able to work with so many talented women, and I think that that's really important too, because a lot of women are being hired because they are smart and not just because of the way that they look. And a lot of times beautiful women are also smart. So two things can be true at once. And I think that we have a really good group of women that we've worked with at NFL Media and just in general. I mean, I'm good friends with Mina Kimes, and I think that it's not like, I don't want to say sorority, but it's sort of like a club that we are all in because we all deal with the same type of stuff. And so we have a lot in common. And I think that I've seen a change in terms of women supporting other women. Like, I'm a big believer in, like, we're going to be way stronger together instead of pitted against each other, which naturally there's only so many opportunities and so many jobs. And so that's how it's kind of set up. But when it comes down to it, like, it's not anyone's fault whether or not they're getting these jobs. It's like the decision makers. So like you want to band together to support each other, and then we end up, making out way better in the end. So I'm very like, rah, let's go for all the other women that I work with.
We've been very fortunate to have had Mina Kimes on. Now, look, we haven't had her dog, is it Laurie, on yet? Your dogs have made an appearance.
Lenny.
Lenny,
Lenny is no joke.
I'm so sorry.
Lenny is he is like, we went hiking, me and Mina, and she brought Lenny, and I had to like watch Lenny for a second. She was like, just don't make any sudden moves or really like look at him. And I was like, okay, no problem. And Lenny's tiny, like, but I was terrified of Lenny.
And just the last one for me, Colleen. Like, obviously you're not doing Thursday night kickoff this week, a little week off, but Thanksgiving as a fan, any major plans? Are you going to try and get to a game, or just sit down, chill out, and hope that Dak Prescott scores more than 4 fantasy points? Or what's the plans for Thanksgiving and Thursday?
Oh my gosh. Wait, so are you a Texans fan and you have Dak on your fantasy
I'm a Broncos
team?
fan. Unfortunately, I'm literally joking. I hope the Cowboys win. I don't want to give away my picks for later on in the show, but I'm just joking a bit. I mean, I'll take Prescott out and I'll put Mahomes in instead. Mahomes hasn't scored that many points in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's true. I for the first week since the season started, I'm not getting on a plane tomorrow morning and going to a different city, which I'm so happy that I get to just like chill out at home, go make some food. We're going to have some friends over, and I'm just like, it's going to be nice to just sit on the couch and watch games just like a fan, and not have to worry about, okay, like who did what there and what happened and what's their stat line right now and like what happened coming into this game. Like, I can just relax and watch the games. Now, Bears and Lions, it's not like that's a good game, but I will watch every single second of it. Like, I don't know if DeAndre Swift is maybe going to like carry the Lions to their first win. That could happen, but I think the Bears, they're going to win that game, and hopefully Matt Nagy doesn't get fired the next day, because I've seen those reports flying around. It's a little touch and go in Chicago right now.
If they lose that game, I think he's definitely going on Friday.
I know. I mean, but like, who tells someone that they're going to get fired later that week? Like, if the reports are true, he was told on Monday that he was going to get fired on Friday. If that was me, I'd be like, later, I'm out. It's Thanksgiving.
Instead of Black Monday, it's Black Friday this year. Literally Black Friday. So there you go.
Exactly.
Well, Colleen, we're glad that you get to enjoy Thanksgiving on the couch watching the games. There's a veritable feast of football, and on fans over here will get to watch it. We know that NFL Network starts in Ireland at 3 p.m. We also look forward to the rest of Thursday night football for the rest of the season. I remember Mark Ingram when the Ravens won the championship, so maybe there'll be something like that again to look forward to. But we cannot thank you enough for taking the time to come on to the Irish NFL show. We hope to see you in LA in February.
Yes, listen, let me know when you're here, and then I'll let you know when I'm in Ireland, and we'll do this all the time.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Colin.
Thank you.
And the blowout continues. It's another touchdown. What a huge play at this point in the game. Breaks the tackle, now Allen fighting through, and he's got space. He will score. Touchdown.
How do we introduce our next guest? Played for multiple teams, a Super Bowl champion, one of the greats of the game, Rod Woodson. Rod, it's a massive welcome to your show. You're not just a Super Bowl champion, former football player. You've got your foundation, Hope Through Football, and you're also, I've been told, the honorary president of the London Olympians American Football Club, to say the least. Westwood One Radio as well. Rod, on Thanksgiving week, happy Thanksgiving, and a warm welcome to the Irish NFL show.
Well, I definitely appreciate you guys having me on. I've been so blessed to meet so many wonderful people, and now I get to meet you guys. And the more the merrier. The one thing I think the pandemic has done for everybody is that we realize it's really family and friends. That's what means everything. Everything else is fleeting. Everything else goes away, but family and friends, they stay forever.
Absolutely. And Rod, we ask this of every guest, especially our American guests. Have you any Irish heritage yourself? Have you ever been to Ireland? I know you're obviously in contact with a lot of coaches in Ireland and the UK, but have you been over here yet?
I have. So back in 1987, I was running track, and we had a track meet there. I spent a total of 4 days there. Loved it. I can't remember the hotel we stayed in, but it was a lady who was making knitting sweaters in the hotel lobby. And I went up to her and I'm like, how much? And she was like, it wasn't that much at the time. And I'm just like, I bought 2 sweaters. I still have them in my closet. They're the best made sweaters that I've ever purchased in my life. I mean, I had them since 1987 and they look brand new. I mean, it's awesome. And then, so when it gets cold out, I throw one of those jokers on and I am warm.
Well, you're certainly welcome to come over and pick up another sweater anytime you want. But you mentioned there that you ran track. And I mean, if we take you back to your time at Purdue, yeah, something of a superstar in college sports. You played both sides of the ball. You were an accomplished track and field athlete. You left Purdue with all sorts of records set, some of them still standing. You were going into the draft, and the story is that Chuck Noll allegedly told Tony Dungy not to scout you because you weren't going to be there at 10. He wanted to take you, but you weren't going to be there. And then you were there. And obviously the Steelers are delighted and they picked you. Just wondering, in terms of going to that organization, for you, were you aware of the expectations? What was it like to be drafted by the Steelers?
Yeah, I mean, soon as I get drafted on draft day, we fly, me and my agent, we fly to Pittsburgh that evening. And I remember walking into Three River Stadium into the office, and as soon as you walk in, 4 Super Bowl trophies are sitting right there. So you're like, the standard. Like, so as soon as I walked in, I'm like, okay, is either we're going to win or we're going to get fired here. So, I think it was, I watched the Steelers growing up. So I knew, who Mean Joe Green and Chuck Noll and all those guys. And when I got there, Chuck was still the head coach. Tony Dungy was the defensive coordinator and the defensive back coach. But Donnie Shell was still playing. Mike Webster was still playing. And John Stallworth was still playing there. So I got to be around the Super Bowl mentality. And the one thing about Pittsburgh is they have a saying, the standard is the standard. So you either adhere to the standard or you're not a Steeler. And you learn that at an early age. Chuck Noll told us, as soon as we got there, we had 5 rookies in our secondary the year I got there in 87. And he told us that if we do not tackle, we do not play. And I'm like, well, that's okay. I can tackle. I'm a blue collar guy. I'm going to tackle somebody. So I enjoyed it. I got to meet Mel Blount, who I think is the best corner to ever lace up cleats in the National Football League. When they change a rule for an individual player, you know you're doing something right. So they changed that, that 5-yard chuck rule because Mel Blount was just so big, so physical, way before his time. So you did feel, and they still do today, the standard that is set before anybody who's drafted by the Steelers, anybody who's signed by the Steelers. When you walk in that building, you have to adhere to a certain standard. And they'll take, kind of like the craziness for a while, but after a while, they will get rid of those guys because they want a good culture environment for inside the building. And we've seen it. We've seen it over the years, and I'm not saying Antonio Brown. I think Antonio Brown's a wonderful player, but we've seen they got rid of him over the course of time, even though he's still a dynamic player for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when he's playing. So, they just have a certain standard, and if you don't adhere to it, eventually they will remove you from the building.
Rod, you mentioned the standard. We were fortunate to interview both Coach Cowher and Kevin Colbert, the existing general manager, and they both referred to the standard during both those interviews. Can you talk to us about throughout your experience with the Steelers in terms of working for Chuck Noll, and obviously Tony Dungy, who went on to win the Super Bowl, secondary coach at the time, and then at a later stage of your career with Coach Cowher?
Yeah, when I first got there, obviously I know who Chuck Noll was. How do you, if you're watching football, you got to know who Chuck Noll is, especially back then, right? He's really the only Super Bowl winning coach has won back-to-back Super Bowls twice, right? Nobody else has done that ever in the history of football. So, he was kind of intimidating because he accomplished so much, and I caught him on the last 5 years of his career. So I didn't say a bunch to Coach Noll. I kind of if he didn't say anything to me, I had a good day, right? It's like he didn't mess with me, I didn't mess with him. But if you did something wrong, he would let you know, and he did love on you. That's the great thing. And at the same time with Chuck, I think you felt that, Chuck had a way of, he loved like reading literature. He loved reading books. So he would take a passage from his literature all the time and put it into the weekly message. And I remember him telling me the first week I got there is that just because you're athletic and you have talent doesn't mean anything in this league, because everybody's talented. And that's why guys get drafted. But it's the players who take their self-study, their peer study, their coaches study, apply that back in practice every single day and every single rep, and apply that back in the games on a consistent basis. Those guys separate themselves from the average players who only play 3 years, 3.9 years, to a guy that can play 10 years, and to a guy who can maybe be a Hall of Famer. And when he first said it, I was like, yeah, whatever. I'm a 21-year-old guy. I think I'm all that anyway, in a bag of chips. And then he didn't say it anymore. He said it once to me. And then we got a coach named, so Tony Dungy leaves after the first 2 years. Then we got a guy named Rod Russ who came in. And Rod said the exact same thing that Chuck said 3 years later. And it really challenged me as an athlete to be more than just athletic. And he cussed me out in a certain way in a walkthrough, and he told me that he would take me through how to study film. And I remember going through that film study with Rod Russ, and after about 5 weeks, the little green light clicked on. I'm like, oh, this is all they do? Oh my God, are you kidding me? And he was like, this is all they do. And it was just, I went to 7 straight Pro Bowls after that. I went to 11 total. But without Rod Russ really challenging me as a human being, as a football player, to be more than an athlete, I don't know if I would have changed. So, those guys in my time frame was outstanding. And then, Chuck Noll retired, and I get Cowher. I get Cowher, Dick LeBeau, and Tom Cates. And Bill is great. I love Bill because Bill is very fair. But it's Dick LeBeau was the one, right? He was the mastermind. I mean, he could have been a Hall of Fame coordinator, coach, and obviously he's a Hall of Fame player. So he allowed me to be me inside of his system. And that system is still ran today by the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, I was very blessed to go to a franchise that had such a culture. And the one thing that the Steelers would do, and talking about the Rooney family, Chuck Noll wasn't the sexiest name when they signed him as the head coach. And Bill Cowher, I didn't know who Bill Cowher was. I remember I was on vacation and they said, "Hey, you got a new coach for the Steelers." And I was like, "Who?" They're like, "Bill Cowher." And I'm like, Bill who? Where'd Bill come from? But they take men who can galvanize other men and can really make them play for not the back of the jersey, but the front of the jersey. And that's what Cowher was. And that's why they've only had 3 coaches in the history of their franchise. You got Bill Cowher, I had Chuck Noll, you have Bill Cowher, and now you got Mike Tomlin. Because they don't look for the X's and O guy. They're trying to find men who can galvanize other men and be a leader in front of them. And that's what Bill was. And I love Bill Cowher to death. Still wish he was coaching, but he does a good job on CBS.
Rod, you mentioned the legendary Dick LeBeau. Obviously, you beat his interception record, but I think he said to you, "Yeah, but I did all mine at cornerback," which was his way of getting back at you back in the day. It's funny though. I was thinking about this. Thomas Edison, Alessandro Volta. There's many great men that have been involved in electricity, and electricity seems to me to be a theme for your career. You, I believe, went to Purdue because you wanted to study electrical engineering. You were undoubtedly electric on the field, one of the greatest secondary players the NFL has ever seen, fundamentally, lights out. But then equally, you're electric off the field in many ways, Rod. You've done an awful lot of work off the field, but even when we, as fans today, look at something that's now taken for granted, the idea of unrestricted free agency, the idea of players having a degree of control over their own destiny, everybody forgets this is only a reasonably recent invention, and you were one of the core 15 original plaintiffs to generate that and create that, and that ultimately it's benefited all NFL players immensely. I'm just curious, I mean, what drove you in relation to this, and what was that journey like? Because that obviously couldn't have been easy, being one of those core individuals named in relation to the application, obviously, against the NFL in the first instance.
Yeah, I started playing football because my brothers played. I was the youngest of 3 boys. I only played because they were playing football. And I just got a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit bigger. I was a skinny little fart when I was young. From my 9th grade year to my 10th grade year, I grew about 2.5 inches, 3 inches, and I gained about 30 pounds. And, that's where maybe the football, I just got a little bit better in football at that point because I was a little bit bigger and a little bit faster. I've always ran track my whole life. But I think the biggest thing for me is, just doing the right thing. So when I first got drafted in the NFL, I remember it was in 1987. That was the holdout year for in National Football League. And that's when I was running track. That's when I went over to, my first place to go when I went over to Europe was to Nice, France. And then I eventually went to Ireland. I went to different places over there running in, that what they call the diamond circuit nowadays. And I enjoyed that. But once I signed my contract and 4 years later, I couldn't become a free agent. That's what kind of blew me away. And I'm like, wait a minute, these guys have my rights. And if I don't play with them, I don't play. Oh, that's not fair. That's like, you cannot do that to people. I mean, it's no other job in the world that doesn't have freedom of choice. And that was our thing. And that was my thing. It's like, we should have freedom of choice. And then I went through my second contract. And then once I finally left, we decertified as a union. And then that's when we sued the NFL, because as a union here in the US, you cannot sue your employers, but as an association, you can. So we decertified, became the Players Association, which we still are today, the NFLPA. We sued, we won, and then that's when we not knowing, the onslaught of what it's going to look like today. We were just suing just to, have freedom of choice. And it's where we're at today. It kept growing. The TV contracts kept getting bigger. But we just wanted to have that choice, that if we didn't want to play for one team, we can play for another. And I think that's the right thing to do. My dad was a blue collar guy, never graduated high school. But he left me one thing when he died. He left me his last name. And I just believe that I should live with such integrity that it brings honor to the last name and it doesn't bring shame, because that's what he left me. So that's what I've done my whole life. I try to always live with integrity, do everything the right way, treat people kindly. I don't think I'm better than anybody else just because I played a sport and made some money. I'm just a country boy from Indiana that got to play ball, got to play a sport, and I still don't really understand why sports athletes that play a game that really doesn't change anybody's life, right, make so much money. That still kind of shocks me. But, I was blessed to have a talent to get to play in the National Football League and had some great mentors along the way. Like I said, Chuck, Tony, Rod Russ, Dick LeBeau, Dom Capers, Bill Cowher, so many great mentors along the way outside, just in football, but then guys outside of football to lead me in the right path. And everything I have in my life is because of football. Everything I've really done in my life is because of football. I know a lot of stuff, or a little bit about a lot, but I know a lot about football because I've been blessed with a lot of different coaches to just kind of feed into me. And I was hungry for it. And, so it's one of those things that I don't take myself too serious, but I do take my platform serious. And I love ball. I love giving back to football here in the US and abroad. And, the more I can do that and the more people who love the game itself, I'm happy.
That actually leads me into my next and my final question. Hopefully it's okay to just do it all around each one very quickly. But, you're talking there about your life after football. And could you maybe talk to us about your Hope? Sorry, is it Hope for Football Foundation? Sorry, I got the name wrong. But also, Rod, I should have said you're a Pro Football Hall of Famer class 2009 in the intro, and I didn't. My sincere apologies. It's my fault. My bad. But of course, congratulations on that immortal honor in Canton, Ohio.
Michael, my wife doesn't care I'm a Hall of Famer either. She makes me take out the trash with my Go jacket on and my ring. She'll just take the trash out. All right, just right now. But anyway, Hope Through Football. So when I played, I had a foundation called Woodson Charities. And I did a camp for 15 straight years in my hometown. And I loved doing it. And I got away from it when my kids got a little bit older, to spend a little bit more time with them. Now they're older, they're 21 to 31. And when I got fired by the Raiders, I was like, what can I really do? What can I give back? How can I give back to the grassroots effort? Because I think you really got to reach the kids at a grassroots effort to really change their lives and plant seeds in them. And I'm like, it was me and a lady named Loretta Hayes Hill. We were sitting in a hot tub in Mexico, and we were like, oh, let's start our own foundation. And we started thinking up names. I'm like, what about Hope? And then we're like, yeah, that's a great name. And then we just came up with helping our youth practice excellence through football, because sports can teach you so many good things. And it's not just football, but sports in general can teach us how to work together. We all don't have to get along, right? I mean, in football, you got 53 guys in a locker room. Everybody don't think alike. Everybody doesn't look alike. Everybody's not from the same background. But we have one common goal when we step on the field, and that's to win and work together. And that's what I like promoting. I like promoting that we can work together, even though that we are different, even though we may look different, we can still have that same outcome. And at the end of the day, I think sports can teach young players and young kids how to, when they see themselves in the mirror, to appreciate and believe in the person they see in the mirror. Because there's so many kids that don't believe in who they are. And if they don't believe in them, who's going to believe in them? I mean, at the end of the day, they need to have that self-confidence. And I think sports can give that to you. I've seen kids who come in very shy, and over the course of maybe a year or so, year and a half, you see them kind of blossom into a different person because they've had success on a court, on a field, on the track, whatever it might be, whatever that sport is. And then they take that to school with them. And that really changes their mindset about who they are. Because we always tell kids to be a better version of yourself tomorrow than you are today. And the only way you can do that is be honest with yourself. But you only can be honest with yourself when you see the person in the mirror and when you like the person in the mirror. Because if you lie to the person in the mirror, nothing's good is going to happen to you, right? Because, people always say, you can look for outside help. And I tell kids all the time, the person that can help you is the person that's looking you in the mirror. That person can help you more than anybody else. And you have to believe in that person. So that was one of the biggest reasons I started Hope Through Football again, to kind of give belief to kids across not just the US, but internationally. The kids are all the same. They all struggle mentally, especially with the pandemic and the way it's hit a lot of people and a lot of families and a lot of kids. And I feel it's my obligation to give back. And if I don't give back, I'm a selfish person, and I don't want to be selfish.
Well, you're definitely not selfish, and that what you're saying there around camaraderie and I suppose the team working together, I mean, that is the essence of achieving a goal. And I'm thinking that we've been very fortunate to have had on this show a couple of Super Bowl winners. We had Mike Singletary from the '85 Bears, we Keith Talib from the Broncos.
Oh, yeah.
But you joined the Ravens, and you were part of, I suppose, what's arguably the meanest, baddest defense that the NFL has ever seen. Can you talk to us a little bit about your experience with the Ravens and winning a Super Bowl?
Yeah, okay, first, Colin, did Mike Singletary, when you had him on, did he smile? Did he smile at all? A little bit?
Touch and go, Rod.
See, every time I see Mike Singletary, I walk up to him, I say, give me a smile, Mike. Give me a smile. And then he smiles for me because he never smiles. I'm like, dude, you're too serious. Like, life is too short to be that serious. But going back to the 2000 Bears, or excuse me, 2000 Ravens, we knew. I mean, it didn't happen in 2000. It really happened in '98, right? I got there in '98. And it really had the same stuff that I learned in Pittsburgh. Because that's when Marvin Lewis was our linebacker coach in Pittsburgh for a couple years. Then he becomes a defense coordinator in Baltimore. He calls me and is like, we got a lot of talent. We just don't know how to win yet. So can you come and help me kind of set the tone? So when I got there, everything that we used to do in Pittsburgh, all the meetings, all the scheduling individually, just as players, not with coaches, just with players, I took there. And the first year, they didn't like it. They didn't like meeting on our own all the time. The first year was probably, they probably stayed 15 minutes. They wanted to get out. The second year's a little bit better. We cut a couple of those guys who didn't really want to buy into the whole process. And then once we cut that second group in that third year, that's when everything clicked. And I think Marvin Lewis became one of the best defense coordinators in the National Football League that year. He had some great game plans, but then he would also listen to us. So he might have something that he wants to call, and we'd be like, man, we don't understand the defense that you want. And he would scrap it. And that to me makes a really good coordinator when they start listening to the players, because the players are one that have to play. And Ray Lewis was a young third-year player when I first got there. And I remember him, he was like, I led the team in tackles. I'm like, well, that's great. There's 31 other guys like that. There's 31 other guys that lead their team in tackles. How do you become the best player? How do you become great? How do you become excellent and excel at something is make big plays and big games and big moments. And that'll define your destiny. And in that third year, we played the Tennessee Titans in the divisional round. Into the game, Eddie George comes out and runs a little option route. McNair throws it. It bounces off Eddie George's hands right into the lap of Ray Lewis, and he runs it in for a touchdown to kind of seal the game. And that's the year we won the Super Bowl. And when he came to the sideline, and I was like, that's what I'm talking about. That is the big play that will define who you are over the course of your history, over the course of your playing career. And that was like the birth of the great Ray Lewis. That one play was an indication of what he was going to become. And he arguably became the best middle linebacker the game ever saw, but also probably the best leader I think the game ever saw, because all the stuff that happened to him in that third year leading up to it, guys can kind of resonate when they do things wrong. They kind of feel who he is and how he overcame that. So, going there, arguably, I think it was the best defense ever to lace it up on a given year.
Rod, that move to the Ravens also coincided with your I suppose you making a positional change to safety from corner. Was that something that you intended? And I suppose, how did you adapt to that situation?
Well, my whole life I played safety. So when I was 9 years old for the Powell Raiders, I was a safety and running back and receiver. I went to high school, went to junior high. I was a safety, running back, receiver again. Went to high school. I was a safety, running back, receiver. Went to college. I was a safety, receiver, little running back. I run my 40 at the combine. They were like, "Oh, you're going to play corner." And I'm like, what? Corner? Like, I don't know how to play out there. But luckily for me, I did have Tony Dungy. And Tony helped me kind of, if you know who Tony is, Tony doesn't raise his voice. He's so nourishing and loving. So he helped me kind of transition my way through to learning the position. And it took me about 2.5 years to really learn the position to play, how to play corner. So moving back to safety, once I got to Baltimore, it was kind of like you're gone all day from the house and you come home and you sit on the couch and you go, oh, man, that feels really good. My feet like saying, thank you. That's what it was like for me. It's like I moved to the position, and it was a learning curve again, because I had to readjust my thinking, but it was kind of refreshing, because that's what I was. My mentality was a safety the whole time I played corner. I just had to adjust it a little bit from playing out there. Then when I moved back inside, it was really fun again. But a quick story, my first preseason game that I had to play against, we played against Atlanta Falcons. That's when they had Jamal Anderson. And Jamal Anderson was 6'3", 235. And I came down, hit him, and I stood up and my helmet went down on me. And I got this scar. I don't know if you guys can see it. I got like a scar right here, indention. That was from Jamal. And I'm bleeding, this coming down on all sides of my face. And I look at Ray. I said, man, I don't know if I can do this, man. This safety stuff, I don't know about this now. But then, I just learned how to not hit them so high when they got big guys like that, to hit them a little bit lower. So it was a natural progression and a natural transition for me, but it was refreshing also.
Rod, obviously, and just one final question for you. Obviously, this week is Thanksgiving week. I know you're on the call for Westwood One on the Bills versus Saints game. Another team's playing this week, obviously, is the Raiders. You're on the call with the Raiders and Chiefs, the last week with them as well. So you've got plenty of views, I'm sure, on the 6 teams that are going to be playing on Thanksgiving. But Thanksgiving is all about giving thanks very much. And you kind of shared a lot of the thoughts about how you've given thanks back through your foundation, through Hope Through Football and things like that. But also as fans, we look at your career and the greatness you've worked with. We haven't even touched on a brief stop in the 49ers with Mariucci and Young. You were at the Raiders with the legendary Al Davies. Your era and your career has straddled from the Elway, Marino, and Montana regime that free-to-air fans in the UK and Ireland got to know initially, and you were finishing playing with Brady and Manning, for example. I have to ask, in all of that time, all of that experiences, not necessarily people you played with, because I appreciate that will put you in a bit of an awkward position, and you might not get as many Christmas cards this year if you answer that one honestly. But in terms of offensive players you played against, who was the one? Maybe it's going to be Jamal after that story you just told, but who was the one that gave you the most challenge, or you looked and went, damn, this is tough. That's greatness, as you're alluding to with Ray Lewis.
Yeah. Well, I can say this. I'll do it two ways. So as receiver, I mean, I did play against Jerry, but I only played against Jerry Rice once. Right. So I could say Jerry, who is the best receiver to ever play in the National Football League. That is like not even a question. But the guy who I played every year, who really gave me some headaches, was Webster Slaughter for the Cleveland Browns. He was 5'10-ish, quick, create separation off the break. That's like the worst case scenario for DB. He hates receivers that can create separation off the break. And then probably 2 years later, 3 years later, that's when Andre Reed comes in. And Andre Reed is just as big as I am. He might be a little bit taller. He might be 6'2-ish. He was about 220. Most slot receivers are like Webster Slaughter, 5'10", 185. So I can, like, if I get my hands on Webster Slaughter, he's not going anywhere. Well, I put my hands on Andre Reed and he slapped him off. And I was like, wait a minute, I gotta change my game plan with this guy. This guy's as strong as I am. So I think those two guys were the guys, receiver-wise, that gave me a lot of issues. There was only one running back in my time frame that I was scared to hit. A guy named Kevin Mack for the Cleveland Browns. He had no neck. I think he just had a head and it went right to his shoulders. He didn't have no neck. I mean, it's just, everything was broad. And the guy would, like, one game, he knocked out 3 of my defenders. He knocked out Greg Lloyd, Thomas Everett, and Larry Griffin all in the same game. And I remember Webster Slaughter's trying to block me. There was a running play, and he comes out to my side. And I'm like, how am I going to tackle this dude? Like, what in the world? And I take Webster and I threw him down, and he tripped over Webster. I'm like, phew, man, I don't got to tackle that dude. And I touched him for a tackle. I'm like, okay, hey, can somebody get to this guy before I have to hit him? I mean, he was the only guy that I was really ever, like, trying to figure out, like, how I was going to hit this guy. And then, but as a defense, like a defensive unit, Barry Sanders was the only back we ever game planned. I mean, that guy, we never let our edge rushers speed rush against him, because if you go one way, if you go up, he's coming back. And if he has that crease, man, that's tough tackle, that kid. That guy is like one of the best ever in space. So he was the only one in my 17 years that we ever game planned for running.
Well, I think, we've been very fortunate to have had a number of guests on over the last couple of years, and this has genuinely been, if not my favorite or the best, definitely the most enjoyable one that we've had. And just hearing your stories about your career and also life after your career, it's been fantastic to listen to. I want to wish you, your family, happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy the call on Thursday in New Orleans. Hopefully it's going to be a good game. Drew Brees back in New Orleans, and also we usually invite people to Ireland and say, look, we'll get you a pint if we meet you over here. But look, if we meet you over here, we'll get you a sweater or two. Maybe we can. Thanks so much, Rod, for coming on.
I appreciate you guys, man. Enjoy. Blessings to you all.
Okay, our next guest on the Thanksgiving special episode of the Irish NFL Show is none other than NFL Network reporter Gian Slater. Gian, your second time on the Irish NFL Show, a very, very warm welcome, and thank you for coming back, especially during the season and on Thanksgiving week.
No problem. Happy to get it to work. Thank you guys for working around the schedule. You can see I'll give you kind of a bird's eye view. This is the press conference room where the Cowboys do the Mike McCarthy presser. And then this is where we often feel like we're animals in a zoo because tours come through here and check us all out while we're inside here. So today, very busy. We had practice and then I had phoners with the Raiders team. And then after this, go downstairs. The Cowboys have an entire podcast room. So we do a thing called Media Mash with all the media members once a week. So exciting week. I'm looking forward to moving off of the film from the Kansas game and focusing on the next one, as I'm sure they are too.
It's always good to have a short week in the NFL, especially when there's 3 games on. Jen, I actually missed your first appearance. I can't remember why, but I was gutted that I missed it. But you did tell the guys the last time that you wanted to maybe go and discover your Irish heritage. I know you've been very busy this season. Have you had a chance to do that at all? Or
I haven't, but so the last time I was on here, I told them that my dad, who was the youngest of 6 siblings, did a 23andMe test and found out that our last name is not Slater. We think it's O'Looney or Collins, and right off the boat from Ireland. And we think it's somewhere around Kerry. What is it? Kerry Island? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, but the problem is with the Irish, they have like 10 brothers and sisters and families, and all of them ended up in San Francisco and were firefighters and in the local community. So we've had a tricky time linking it, but that's where all of our lineage has gone. So in fact, I'm very Irish. I'm kind of excited about it because all of our family loves to drink and have a good time, and a lot cooler than just being English.
Well, I think, Jane, that would suggest that you need to do a family trip to Ireland and, drink and enjoy yourself in Dublin. And you certainly have people who'll show you around all of the island. My mother is from Kerry, and I know Cork as well. And we got Michael up north. So you got tour guides everywhere.
That would be amazing. Don't be surprised if I actually end up taking you up on that sometime.
We'd be delighted. But moving on to the Cowboys, and I think one of the success stories in the NFL this season, I think he's head and shoulders above everybody for Defensive Rookie of the Year. Micah Parsons, he has been phenomenal. They drafted him as an inside linebacker. He's moved to the edge. Can you talk to us about him as a person and I suppose just his impact on the Cowboys team?
Well, it's interesting that this conversation came up today, even with Jerry Jones on 105.3 The Fan here, which is a radio station that does Jerry's interviews on Tuesdays. And he had said that he didn't want an inside linebacker. He wanted a pressure player. And even Micah conceded that they sat him down and said they had slated at that pick a corner, that they needed him to prove his value. And I was talking about this with someone else because this defensive staff was so awful last year. The defensive line coach, Jim Tomsula, and Mike Nolan, the defensive coordinator. I mean, when players told me they were trash and couldn't teach, blah, blah, blah. What stood out to me was what players like Leighton Van Der Esch were saying early on, and Randy Gregory, without even prompting them, just how much they loved Dan Quinn. And I just kept thinking, what if Micah Parsons had been picked there and he had gone to Mike Nolan and said, I want to rush the passer. I want to be on the edge. I don't think Mike Nolan would have known what to do with Micah Parsons, and what a waste of this rookie campaign for him. Whereas Dan Quinn has felt so collaborative. The players have said if something doesn't work, they throw it out. And the fact that Micah went up to him and said, I've barely played edge rush, I barely played it in college, didn't play my senior year of college at all, but I want you to let me try something here. And to see him say, let's see what you got, kid, and to slowly keep putting things on his plate, but in the absence of Randy Gregory and DeMarcus Lawrence, not fully committing him to that role, which I think gives this defense an element of surprise that they haven't had in the past. And so credit to Dan Quinn for, I think, getting the most out of Micah. But what I love about Micah is we had practice not too long ago, and I had asked him about what does it mean to have someone like Patrick Mahomes say that you're a special player, that as a rookie you stood out. And he said, everyone keeps talking about the rookie wall. And he says, I don't know if I buy into that. He goes, I want to keep climbing that wall because I want to see what's on the other side. But just to have the league take notice of him, DeMarcus Ware and I had a conversation about him at the beginning of the season. And I asked him how he should use him. And the Cowboys are actually utilizing him very similar to what Ware said they should have, which was he played this 3-4 hybrid role. And in working with Micah, he thought he was very capable of it. And what I love about Jerry Jones is he always takes into consideration the opinions of others smarter than him. Like there was somebody that once told me he's the type of guy that asks the garbage man, what's he think about the Cowboys? And I got the sense that he really, obviously you perk up when you talk about a guy like DeMarcus Ware and what he says, but I just think it really, really stood out that Mike has made such an impact so quickly on not only his teammates, but across the league.
Yeah, and a slight adjustment away from the Cowboys. And then obviously you might have heard the news today that Jason Garrett has been fired by the Giants as coordinator. You know him very well from obviously his time in Dallas, nearly a decade there as head coach. Are you surprised it hasn't worked out? And where do you think that leaves him in the future? Bearing in mind only last offseason he was interviewing for the Chargers job.
I've always thought Jason would be an incredible college football coach. I think he's good with building up men. I think a lot of these guys really bought into the process. Even Ezekiel Elliott was asked about him today, and he talked about how close they were. What I always loved seeing was Jason working out with Dak Prescott after practice. And we didn't always love the process. We didn't always love things about Jason, but he was consistent. And I think even when you talk about disciplining kids, right? I don't want to compare NFL grown men to kids. People like expectations. They like a clear set of, here's the playbook. And I think that's what stood out for me about Jason. But I think if you just looked at the offense, and this happens with coaches across the league. I mean, Dan Quinn himself said that he had to go back to the drawing board. He asked for people to give their assessment of him as a leader and as a coach. And he really was introspective about that. And then has used some of that introspection to even help these guys here. I think it wouldn't hurt Jason to have that year away. And also, I haven't heard the greatest of things about the way Joe Judge leads and the way that he's handled things in New York. And so I think Jason was sort of the sacrificial lamb. Wouldn't be surprised if Joe Judge is down the line, and David Gettleman too, the GM. I just think they haven't made a lot of great moves, but yeah, it's unfortunate, but I think he would be a dynamic college coach. I'm sure he'll get some looks somewhere else. For people thinking it'll be back in Dallas, I don't see that happening. It's like when people kept saying, well, Dez is going to come back. And I'm like, no, he's not. Like, it's very rare to see someone like a Cam Newton come back to an organization, or God, what's another example of that? I mean, there's not too many of it where you can go back to where you came from. So I don't see Jason Garrett coming back. I mean, I could see Jason Garrett possibly in scouting. That's what his dad did. And, I think he's pretty good at that. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to be something here. I really think he'd be really great at college. TCU is looking for a head football coach. TCU's here in Fort Worth, for your fans that aren't familiar with them. Gary Patterson, after I think it was 2 decades as the head coach, he would be an intriguing possibility. No one's tossed that around. I haven't heard that yet, but I think it might be interesting.
Let's see what happens. Hopefully by the time this goes out, nothing has happened yet, but let's see. The last day you were on, G, and the day after, Dak Prescott signed his contract. Are you surprised with how well he's played after suffering such a serious injury last year?
Absolutely. I mean, that was the way it was described to me when it happened. It was like a tornado came through, blew down the house. You're able to build back the bones of the house, in other words, the structure of it, but the wiring was messed up. And so you hear that, and then you see the way that he played, and then to have this shoulder injury that was unique to baseball players, that they were very, very careful with. They talked to the Rangers and they talked to the Yankees, which was really extraordinary. When you look at injuries in the league, you compare them to others, even when you look at the combine, there's all these comps. They didn't really have a comp on the shoulder, but they were really smart about it, and they brought him back. I know there's some people questioning if there's something off with Dak still. I just think Dak goes as his offensive line goes. They've had a lot of problems they haven't had the starting 5 at all this year. Zach Martin missed with COVID the first game of the season. Then they played with the left side, moved Connor Williams, I think, was one of the most penalties in the league. It was ridiculous. So they moved him out, moved Connor McGovern over, and then Terrence Steele, I just don't think has made a lot of sense on the left side. And what's fascinating about all of it is when we would ask Mike McCarthy about moving certain players on the offensive line, he kept saying, well, that's fantasy football. Well, they've been playing a lot of fantasy football this year, moving guys around. So they've been playing their cards real close to the vest, which is why a lot of us didn't have the scoop that Tyron Smith was not playing against the Chiefs on Sunday. And obviously the Chiefs were preparing for that. But him getting sacked 5 times, being under duress, it was a tough one to watch. They held their own, obviously, against the Falcons. But I think when you look at this game this week with Max Crosby, Yannick and Jaku, like that's a really tough front four that's rushing. And I think they're going to find themselves in a very similar situation as you saw against the Broncos, the Chiefs. The Raiders could do it again. And it'd be another, they've lost these 2 AFC games. What happens when it happens 3 times? I think got to be a little careful with the Raiders defensively. Offensively, not too worried about them.
Well, I suppose one of the people who's going to be tasked with scheming for that is obviously the OC, Kellen Moore. And, he's a guy who's getting so much talk around the league, Jane. But for fans over this side of the Atlantic, can you talk to us a little bit? He's a young guy, but obviously very smart. Talk about him potentially as a head coach candidate. Do you see that being a real thing? Is Jerry going to be able to keep hold of him? What's the story just around Moore in general?
What's fascinating with Kellen Moore, he doesn't strike me as an overtly ambitious person. In other words, with Sean Payton, you knew he was overtly ambitious. This was a guy when he was the offensive coordinator here who was equally talked about as a sort of a wonder kid. It was very clear that he wanted greater things. And I don't think it's a situation where Kellen doesn't want that. And I also think you have to be careful. You got to strike while the iron's hot, because Chris Richard was a hot candidate. And then he stuck around another year and then he wasn't. Now, of course, he's in New Orleans. So it'll be fascinating to see what happens. I mean, the thing is, Kellen is still very young, but what he's done with this offense has been incredible. They need to find a way to get back to the run game, which I think will fix itself once they get the offensive line back going. But when you look at all the weapons that Dak has had, and last week was a terrible example of this, but Cedric Wilson, the way he's played at times, Malik Turner, even with his garbage time touchdowns, Tony Pollard, Dalton Schultz, Blake Jarwin. I mean, go down the list. I think he'll be a dynamic coach. The guys really, really like him around here. It's just, he's got such a youthful personality. He doesn't have, I don't want to call it arrogance with Sean McVay, but there's like a real confidence. Kellen's just, he's just a cool guy you'd watch football with. Like there's no airs about him. There's no arrogance about him. And so you have a hard time thinking, when you're the head coach of a football team, you've got to have some level of like these narcissistic traits. If Kellen has them, I just haven't really seen them. So it's not that I don't think he's going to be a great head coach, because I see the way that these guys play for him. But maybe he's a little bit more like the Kevin Stefanskis of the world up there in Cleveland, who just kind of have a little bit more of a laid back personality.
Jane, I know you touched on you want to look forward to Thanksgiving more so than last weekend's game, but I just quickly want to just discuss that game last Sunday, and I suppose just get the kind of general consensus of what's been said this week, because a lot of people were surprised initially at the game last Sunday. The Chiefs came out running and the Cowboys came out throwing, and everybody felt going into the game it would be the other way around. I think in the end, it was 18 runs to 43 passing attempts by Dak. Were you surprised how, I suppose, erratic the offense was last Sunday?
I think it goes back to the offensive line. I mean, the offensive line, if you watched at certain time, Terrence Steele was getting manhandled over there on the left side. I mean, at left tackle, protecting the blind side of your quarterback, you've got a second-year player. And Terrence has done a really good job this year, and I think he did a great job on the right side. I don't want to take anything away from him. But then you're also putting another new guy on the left side in Connor McGovern. And so then with Zeke dealing with the knee situation, and then you're throwing the ball and the balls are getting dropped, or Dak was overthrowing the balls at times. It's like we're almost afraid to call Dak out because he's just so easy to deal with here in Dallas. Like it's not that I think that he gets favors here. It's just, I think a lot of us give him the benefit of the doubt because of the preparation and his commitment to the game, but it was not a great showing for him either. But I think a lot of that had to do with he just wasn't being given a lot of time back there to sort of set the line and do the things that he would typically do. So yeah, I don't really know what to make, just like I didn't know what to make of the Broncos game either. I kept telling people, if you looked at the teams that they played and the way they won those games early in the season, I didn't have a big enough sample size to say what I thought of that Broncos game. But then the Kansas game pops up, and offensively the struggle was there. But then I kept thinking, man, if you would have told me the Cowboys only put up 9 points, you would have thought this would have been a blowout. But the way the defense played, you're sitting there going, well, I mean, It was Kansas City. They did go to the Super Bowl last year. Kansas City has sort of turned it around. Arrowhead's a tough place to play. So it's really hard to make sense of this team. But I think what's been impressive for me is the way that they've played with so many injuries. And look, injuries are happening across the league, but the Cowboys are missing their 2 defensive ends, their starting left tackle. They've been playing with that offensive line. Amari Cooper, one of your best wide receivers, is out with COVID. You lose your CeeDee Lamb, your other best wide receiver, heading into the half, and then these guys are dropping balls. And so, again, injuries aren't an excuse, but those were some big ones.
Yeah, it was just, I think I could talk about that game on Sunday for a whole day, and both sides of the ball, both defense and offense. I'm going to switch from football talk for a very, very quick second. Gene, obviously Thanksgiving on Thursday. Well, this episode going out Thanksgiving tomorrow night. It's different for us over here because it's after work. We get to come home and there's 3 NFL games on. It's fantastic. But, you know, for you working on Thanksgiving, what's your Thanksgiving experience like, obviously working within the NFL? And do you get time to maybe wind down in the evening and watch a late game, or is it just like you have Thanksgiving on the Friday instead?
Yeah, I mean, before I even got into sports, I was a local news reporter. And so when you don't have kids or a family, you always sort of raise your hand and say, I've got Christmas, I've got Thanksgiving. And so since I graduated college in 2003, I've worked every holiday. So I'm just not used to having Thanksgiving off, especially when you cover the Cowboys and they've been playing on Thanksgiving for forever. I love being there. Jerry has the most amazing food in the press box every week. I mean, it is a full-sized buffet. The mac and cheese is probably the best mac and cheese I've ever had. My mother is a terrible cook. And so it's like the Thanksgiving dinner I don't get at home. And then I get there at 6:30 in the morning. I'm there until about 7 o'clock at night, and then I crash. And this year I'll be visiting my family in Chicago. So I'll get up early and fly out, get 2 days, and then I'm back because we've got a Thursday night game against the Saints the following week. So we're all sort of on, this has been a weird year, Cowboy schedule. It has not been an easy schedule, opponents or travel or where they've been playing these games. But yeah, I actually really enjoy watching the games, but also covering them on Thursdays for Thanksgiving.
Traina, I'm actually stateside myself. My wife is from the States. I was in Soldier Field on Sunday, so I'll have to make it down to Jerry's World and try out that mac and cheese at some
So good.
But I'm interested, I suppose, in terms of the game on Thursday, game against the Raiders, and 2 teams who started so hot, but for the Raiders, obviously beset by off the field issues. What are your thoughts going into the game on Thursday in terms of what the Cowboys are going to face?
You know, it's hard to say because Rod Marinelli, the former defensive coordinator, is obviously there in with the Raiders. Rich Bisaccia was the special teams coach here. He is now the head coach in the absence of Jay Gruden. So I know those guys are going to get their team ready to play in this one. It's personal for both of those coaches, right? I remember Rod Marinelli saying something to me once. I'd have to find the tweet because I don't want to misquote him or I'll hear from him. But I essentially asked him about, basically being fired. And he said, well, I served in Vietnam and there's not much worse than that. And so he sort of took it in stride. But I just got off the phone with Max Crosby, who was having a Pro Bowl season. The guy had shoulder and hand surgery. And he says he's literally been at that building since January, so almost 11 months. And he just said that Rod Marinelli has helped him get better every single day and gets them ready to play. And they've got a really, their quarterback pressure rate's the best in the league. So if you don't have Tyron Smith there, I think it could be another tough day. They've got a tough 4-man rush, the same as we saw with the Chiefs and the Broncos. But offensively, I tend to think that Dak is going to be able to turn it around. And even he said it, the offense goes as he goes. And so when he's feeling good and he's having a good game, the Cowboys typically do too. And we saw Tyron Smith back out at practice today. Now, granted, we saw him last week at practice doing light work, but there seems to be a lot of optimism about his ability to play this week. And same for CeeDee Lamb, which is crazy because, that seemed like if you guys watch the playback, the way his head popped right before the first half. And Taysom Hill for the Saints had a concussion. I think he missed like 2 weeks. So we've seen where these guys haven't cleared concussion protocol, but they seem very optimistic about it. But they just have a lot of dogs on this roster. They seem like a really mentally strong team, and it has been a weird year of NFL parity. I mean, even Max Crosby was telling me, I'm looking at my notes, he was just basically saying, look, it really is any given Sunday. And so in this case, any given Thursday, it's hard to say. I think I trust this Cowboys offense a lot more than I trust theirs. And when you consider it, they're missing a lot of key pieces. I mean, a lot of off the field issues. They lost their head coach. They lost, Henry Ruggs in that awful suspected DWI crash. It was awful. And so there's just been a lot that they've been dealing with mentally, but I think for them, it's, it's something personal for your coaches. And we saw the way that this Cowboys team played for Dan Quinn when he played against his old team, the Falcons. I expect the Raiders and that defense to play equally as hard for guys like Rod Marinelli and in this team's case, Rich Bisaccia. So I think it'll be a good game.
Jay, without being complacent, you would expect the Cowboys to win this division, but the NFC race in terms of the 4th seed and the 2nd seed is still very competitive, and the Cowboys are in with a fair show. What have you made of the NFC in overall? I mean, the Cardinals have been a bit of a surprise, and I mean, there's teams losing games. Rams have lost twice in a row. There's teams that are kind of inconsistent of late.
And the Bucs haven't looked that strong as of late. Now, granted, they came back fine, but we're talking about the Giants. And last night, you're just kind of looking at that game going, yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, the Cowboys right now in the East specifically only have a 2.5 game lead. And I think right now they'd be the 4th seed. So you'd be playing some of the tougher teams. So you don't really want that. So it'll be interesting to see how McCarthy manages all that. I think the Packers and Rodgers look the strongest to me. I don't know if I trust the Rams, and I look at the Cardinals, the way they're playing with Colt McCoy, hook 'em. I went to Texas, watching him step up in the absence of Kyler Murray. I mean, I think the Cardinals have become the team to beat, which is amazing to me. Cliff and I have been friends for a very, very long time before he was an NFL coach and before I was a reporter in this league. And there were so many people as he was getting ready to leave college and take this NFL job that doubted him. And so I love seeing it for my friend, personally, I just love that. But yeah, I mean, I look at these teams, I think the NFC is sort of fascinating right now. The Cowboys just need to be really, really careful at this point. Like, again, I wanted to call the Broncos game an anomaly. I think I'd already kind of said the Kansas City Chiefs game in Arrowhead was going to be a tough one, and it's Andy Reid. But if they don't win this Raiders game and they don't beat the Saints is going to be your next test. And Sean always comes ready to play the Cowboys. He loves to show Jerry what he's missing. He's like the girl that got away that didn't get the ring. But they haven't had, I don't know if I trust their quarterback. They've had significant injuries to their offensive line. They don't have Michael Thomas, their wide receiver. So the Cowboys can't get these 2 wins, a team that just lost 3, the Saints, who've been up and down, even though it's, the Mercedes Superdome, which is like a whole nother level. That's the other team I cover. Then I think you have to really start talking about this team. Of course, they've got the Cardinals in December, right after New Year's. And then it's divisional games. They're playing Washington twice, and I think the Giants
away, yeah.
In December. So then it's all NFC. So I think that's why it's not a must win to win against the Raiders and the Saints, but I think it's a must win for their mentality heading in to this final stretch of the year.
Jane, just want to thank you first off for coming on. Never mind being live there from the Star in Frisco. Cowboys Thanksgiving week. Want to wish you, your family, everybody involved there, happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy the game on Thursday. And thank you again for your support. And hopefully we can get you on again, maybe down the stretch in the playoffs. Who knows, maybe Dak can lead the Cowboys team, boys, to the NFC Championship game. But Jane, thank you so much and have a great Thanksgiving.
Anything for my Irish brethren.
Thanks, Jane.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Jane.
Our next guest tonight needs no introduction, but I will give him one anyway. Jimmy Traina from SportsIllustrated.com, a guy that joined Sports Illustrated in 2000, very active on Twitter with the NFL, and we really appreciate you coming on to the Irish NFL show, Jimmy. A very, very warm welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's kind of jarring to hear I don't need an introduction when I'm coming on in Ireland and I'm here in New York, so that makes me feel good. So thank you for that.
The first thing that stood out for me, Jimmy, was seeing your birthday is February the 25th. Mine's the 26th. Not too many people I know in the NFL, so you're definitely going to stay in my mind forever. But look, We ask everybody this, Jimmy. Have you any heritage yourself to Ireland? Have you ever been here before?
I have not been to Ireland. Unfortunately, I'm not well traveled. I've been to Italy, and that's been it really for Europe so far in my life. But, hopefully one day.
Well, you had Becky Lynch on the podcast recently, so you have ties to Ireland. And should you ever make it over this way, Jimmy, you certainly have people who'll happily show you around and to the pubs as well. Now, obviously, look, you've had incredible guests on your podcast, but one of the ones that might be kind of topical is back in 2019, you spoke with Troy Aikman. And he called the officiating at that time nauseating with the number of penalties. This season, it seems worse than ever. We've got the taunting, the roughing the passer, but none of it seems to matter. The ratings keep going up. I think 22.7 million watched the Packers and the Seahawks on Sunday night. Is there a problem with officiating? And if there is, does it even matter to the NFL with the ratings being what they are?
I think there's a problem in that two of the biggest penalties that we've got, taunting and roughing the passer, are really, they're not judgment calls because there are rules in place and the refs are calling it the way the rule is. Listen, don't get me wrong. I think they have a problem with referees for sure. The bigger problem are the rules. The refs have called the taunting the way the NFL has wanted them to. The NFL has made it very clear. If any player goes face to face with any sort of gesture, it's going to be a penalty. If that player turns his head 90 degrees, it's not a penalty. So the refs are doing what they're supposed to be doing, unfortunately. So it's really the rules more than the refs. The 1 o'clock slate, the 4 o'clock slate, and then we get the Sunday night game on NBC. So yes, it's a problem in terms of enjoyment of the games. No, it's not a problem in terms of ratings and the NFL making money.
You comment yearly in relation to the best crews, the worst crews, kind of give a rundown. You and Andrew Brandt in SI obviously talk quite a lot about the business, the circles behind the circles. For you, especially when it comes to what CBS are putting out, Fox, NBC, etc. You had Al Michaels on a couple of weeks ago. I'm just curious about your thoughts on how that's continued to evolve. I mean, some people talk about the Tony Romo effect in recent times, getting more recently retired players. And we've a Giants fan who's not on today who loves Tony Romo distinctly. But what's your feelings on the current landscape on how that's offered and what it looks like today?
Listen, I think the NFL is in great shape in terms of their lead broadcasts. The top teams, we have Tony Romo and Jim Nantz for CBS, Troy Aikman, Joe Buck for Fox, Al Michaels, and Chris Collinsworth for NBC. Those are three solid teams. All the play-by-play people there are great. It's the analysts, I think, that some people may have their favorites, but I think all three of those guys are great. And then with Monday Night Football on ESPN here in America, we have Steve Levy, Brian Griese, Louis Riddick on ESPN, but we have the Manning cast. Now, are you guys getting the Manning cast over there in Ireland?
Delayed. We get it in the morning, which is really annoying. But obviously, I would say if it was more prepared, I guess, lads, it might be on TV for us next year, but it looks unbelievable.
Yeah, so the Manning cast has become a big deal here in America. Now, when I say big deal, a little perspective, they've been getting about a little less than like 2 million viewers for Peyton and Eli Manning on their secondary alternative broadcast. And the main broadcast on regular ESPN is still getting about 12 or 13 million. So it's not like the Mannings have overtaken it. It's a bonus thing. It's an extra thing. And it's been a huge hit. People love it. And I think in terms of your question about media and where we are and maybe things changing, you're going to see a lot more of the alternative broadcast now because of the success of Peyton and Eli doing Monday Night Football for ESPN.
And Jimmy, can I take that another step? I mean, when James Corden went to America, obviously known to European audience as well, one of the big things was his carpool karaoke about the impact on social. It was about the people and having that 5-minute slot they would watch. The Manning cast things on social seems to be blowing everything out of proportion because people want to watch the next day their interaction with Tom Brady or their interaction with the various different special guests they come on. I mean, it's moving in that direction with the social media impact.
Yeah, and they've really hit on something unique. I think in the long run, it's going to end up being a problem because there's going to be a lot of copycats and it's not going to be nearly as good. I mean, you have this dynamic with brothers where, you can bust each other's chops and not have to worry about, I think what I was thinking about this, watching it last night here, they do such a good job with the football stuff and telling you what's going on and analyzing the game. And, Peyton's just unbelievable. And Eli too, he's right there telling you what the defense is doing, what the quarterback's looking at. And then they add in busting each other's chops and making fun of each other. And it's the perfect combination because if you're sitting in your house with your buddies watching a game, that's what you're doing. So they've hit on something. Now, I don't think every combination can do that. I think it's a very, very unique thing. And they've really got something special going with it.
Jimmy, let's talk. I mean, I know Mark mentioned it a little bit there, but let's talk about this podcast. You have Sports Illustrated Media Podcast, over 200 episodes, at least I can see online. You have had some absolute, as we say over here, beezers of guests, like from Stone Cold Steve Austin to Ian Rappaport. The list goes on and on. I know you've mentioned, or Mark mentioned, Al Michaels there, but does any guest to you that we maybe haven't mentioned stand out above them all, or was there a guest that you have brought on over the years that you just were not blown away by and you really enjoyed it? Or for you, is it every week that you just love having somebody different on?
Listen, almost every week is, when whoever the guest is, if they come on and they're ready to play and have fun and not be so serious, then it's great for me. It's a little bit of a weird thing if you don't, it's good to have someone have a little bit of a relationship with, they get you, and then you can have a lot of fun. When you have someone on for the first time, like you guys mentioned Becky Lynch, she was on for the first time last week. I thought it went really, really well, but that was the first time I ever interviewed her. I would imagine if we do another interview, it'll be better because we know each other now after that first interview. In terms of ones that stand out, I'm a huge fan of The Office. I don't know how big The Office is in Ireland. I would imagine it's pretty big there. And you have the original from it. So I had Steve Carell on the podcast a couple of years ago, and that was really exciting for me to have him on. And then in terms of, sports, the Stone Cold one you mentioned was great because he came in studio. And that's always really, John Cena, another one from the WWE, came in studio. When they're in studio, it's really great. And those are the ones that stand out. There's a lot of them stand out just for being a fun hour of conversation, So the Carell one always stands out to me, but I usually enjoy almost all of them.
Jimmy, I know that we share a love and appreciation for the wonderful Larry David, and I want you to imagine, and I don't know even if it would be, but could possibly want to imagine, with blue sky thinking, if Larry David was to make his way into the NFL, would he be more entertaining as an owner going at it with Jerry Jones, or as a GM, or could he have a headset on and replace Vic Fangio as head coach of the Broncos?
So I thought Larry might be coming on my podcast a few weeks ago, and then it didn't work out. So that would have been the answer to the last question, because that would have been a career highlight. Larry has said many times that he thinks that he can legitimately be either a head coach or an offensive coordinator in the NFL. So I would love to see that. I would much rather see him on the sidelines than as an owner or a GM. I think him calling in plays, his reaction to his players not executing the play properly, and his interaction with the referees, I think would be really something to watch. Larry as a head coach or an offensive coordinator would be the answer to that question for sure.
Those press conferences would be amazing.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't think you'd get many of the cliches out of Larry. I don't think Larry would be saying, we just need to give 100%. And we left it all on the field. I think we'd be getting some real gems from Larry.
I mean, we're talking about a bit about the podcast. Al Michaels putting ketchup on steak seemed to be very controversial generally. But you also, Jimmy, obviously write a regular column. You used to write hot clicks before in Sports Illustrated. You write your Traina thoughts every week now. And personally, I mean, I read it every week. I always love the little nuances, the little stories that take us sometime into the world of the absurd that comes up in the NFL, each week. And I mean, like this week, I mean, what did Pete Carroll actually throw out of his pocket instead of his challenge flag, which I love when you kind of bringing in the Twitter replies from people and the various different sort of stories and scenarios. And this might sound like asking you which one of your hits of Derek Jeter is your favorite type of thing. But in the NFL, what's been your favorite one of those over the years? The little bit of absurdity that's creeped in.
Oh, man. Give me 5 seconds to think, because the NFL is so full of absurdity. Let me think. You know, I know it's going to happen. in an hour, I'll think of what the real answer is, because I don't have a great memory. You know, I'll give you one off the top of my head. You know, a few years ago, the NFL had replacement refs, and there was a game between the Steelers and Packers that ended on a ridiculous, controversial touchdown where one of the replacement refs put up his hands for touchdown and the other one was putting his hands for an incomplete pass. And I remember that being just completely wild. You know, I don't know if this lands into absurd, but Tom Brady leaving the Patriots was an enormous thing here. Probably the biggest NFL story, you know, I can remember. And you have, you know, then there was that story where he went into the wrong house to get the playbook, and he lived in Derek Jeter's mansion for a little while. And he's shown us a lot more of his personality since getting out of New England. So, while not absurd, Brady leaving New England in terms of big stories is there. I want to give you one on a good one on absurd, and I'm struggling for like. You know, if I look back,
Jimmy,
I can figure it out. Good.
You're breaking my heart by bringing up Brady leaving in one respect, but I hear you on the Fail Mary game. You know, the Seahawks back, yeah, absolutely. But I'm one of my favorite was always Adam Gase's introductory press conference. Do you remember the bug eyes?
Was good
and
with
just
the faces
crazy
and the eyes. Yeah, I mean, listen, you could go through the Jets have given you nothing but absurd. You know, the butt fumble is obviously. I mean, most people would probably give you that as an answer for absurdity. The Jets have had a long line of that. Yeah, I wish I had a better one for you off the top of my head, but it would take a lot of thinking because there's been so many stories over the years.
Don't be worrying, it's grand. As you both said there, Tom Brady actually went or left the Patriots on Paddy's Day here couple of years ago, so St. Patrick's Day in Ireland is now ruined forever for some people, unless you're not a Patriots fan. Jimmy, this is going out on Thanksgiving. I'm going to put you on the spot here, so don't worry either way. But obviously, Thanksgiving and the NFL are synonymous with each other. We love it here because we can watch a few games early on a Thursday evening, all evening. But what's your tradition on Thanksgiving? Has there been a game in your life that you've watched that stands out to you on Thanksgiving?
Raiders Cowboys will be good, and Bills Saints should be good. You know, a game that stands out is, you know, it's from 100 years ago. It's so long ago, but the Dolphins played the Cowboys in Dallas, and it snowed in Dallas, Texas. And there was a field goal at the end of that game that I think didn't go through, and was run back. And it's on YouTube. If you look up that game, Dolphins, Cowboys, Thanksgiving, that's one that stands out. But the tradition for me is usually, you know, hang around with family, do a little family time early while the Lions are being unwatchable, and then get locked in for the Cowboys, and then go home from my aunt's house and get ready for the night game.
Jimmy, just on that game,
do you want to go, Mark?
Sorry, I call him connection there, but I just was going to say, Jimmy, just on that game, I remember that game being, it was Leon Lett who tried to recover the football.
Yes.
And therefore the Dolphins scored and won the game. But the story behind that, if I remember correctly, was Leon Lett got a consolation message from a young kid who said to not worry about it, because after all, he'd seen in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, someone fumbled the ball through the end zone as a defensive player. Of course, it was Leon Lett playing for the Cowboys against the Bills. So he's been consoled by he'd done something else equally crazy back in the day. Yeah. So the randomness of it all.
Yep, Leon Lett in the snow. That's what it was.
Jimmy, when you had Al Michaels on, you spoke to him a little about his feud with Boomer, and this week we obviously have Rex Ryan and Robert Saleh. It seems that the NFL has been a little bit devoid of feuds in recent years. Is there a feud that stands out to you, or is there a feud you'd maybe like to see? Because a bit like, WWE, it's always better when there's a decent feud.
Well, again, going back to when I was a kid, which was, a long time ago now, Buddy Ryan, the father of Rex, I think he punched his defensive coordinator on the sideline, or he was the defensive coordinator, and there was a fight on the sideline, basically. So that stands out as good as it gets in terms of a feud. I'm trying to think if there's like a player feud. It's not a feud.
Talib Crabtree was a good one.
Which one?
Talib Crabtree.
Yeah. You know what it is? The players are all friendly. They all share the same agents, same marketing companies. They're all on Twitter together. So you're not going to have that, feud. Listen, the Myles Garrett, Mason Rudolph with the helmet. I think that was probably the most intense fight we've seen in a really, really long time on a football field. That was wild. That one was really wild.
Well, perfect at the end of the Bengals-Steelers playoff game a few years ago springs to mind as well. The Bengals.
Yeah.
And temper control, never necessarily the strongest point there, but
I was going to say he's in a feud with everybody every week, so it's probably
including most of his team at the time when he played, So it's a bit of everybody. Jimmy, we mentioned about the media landscape. I suppose one of the biggest evolutions over the last 20 years, but even the last 2 years. Last year we were. Started this show a year ago, and during that year we had the biggest network contracts of all time. Roger Goodell basically locking up the players union and then signing up 10-year deals across the board, ensuring the sanctity of the NFL and the money stream, and obviously on his goal towards 25 billion. Could you, when you started covering the NFL, because you started working for Sports Illustrated back in 2000, could you ever imagine, even just 20 years on, where we would be and where the beast of the NFL continues to grow, sucking up the oxygen in many respects in the media land?
Yeah, back then I probably couldn't have imagined it would get to where it's gotten. Over the past 10 years, I'm not surprised by any of it because of fantasy and gambling. There's so much interest in the NFL because of those two things. And the NFL has something here in America that other sports don't have. And that is, it's once a week. I know you have your Monday night, but it's Sundays. It's a sacrilegious type of thing here. Baseball, 162 games here in America. The NBA, 80-something games. The NHL, 80. This is once a week, 17 weeks. Every game means so much. You could miss a baseball game. You could miss an NHL hockey game. You can miss an NBA basketball. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. The NFL, it's 17 Sundays. So it's an event. It's a huge event. And that makes it special. And then you throw in the gambling, the fantasy, and it has a grip on America that's hard to explain.
Pretty awesome to see the growth over here as well, man. I completely agree. Jimmy, thank you so much for coming on. It'd be great to have you on again. Maybe we can get you a couple of pints of Guinness in LA. At Jimmy Traina, check out the Sports Illustrated Media podcast. And Jimmy, again, thank you for your time. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family, man.
Same to all of you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And the blowout continues. It's another touchdown. What a huge play at this point in the game. Breaks the tackle now with Allen. Fighting through, and he's got space. He will score. Touchdown.
Our next guest on the Irish NFL show, Thanksgiving special, 3 big games tomorrow night. We're delighted to have Thomas Morstead, a punter previously of the New Orleans Saints for a long period, Super Bowl champion, and most recently a guy that played in Tottenham last month for the Jets, Thomas Morstead. Thomas, a very, very warm welcome to the Irish NFL show.
Thanks for having me.
Thomas, I know you've said on Jeff Reinbold's show multiple times now, but you know, we ask every guest this. Do you have any Irish heritage? I know you've got family in England.
No, I don't have any, or not that I know of. We've got my family's in England in northeast Lincolnshire, kind of close to Grimsby Town, and we've got a family tree on my mom's side going back, you know, at least to the, I want to say the last tree I saw was down to the 1600s at some point from some of that lineage. So, and then my dad's side's a little bit from different places. So no Irish as far as I know.
That's a decent family tree going back. That's up there with the redwoods in California, Thomas, I think. But we are delighted to have you on, and we love stories in Ireland. We're a nation of storytellers, and your NFL career that started like a fairy tale. Your rookie season, you go to the Super Bowl, and look, obviously, ambush. And could you talk us through a little bit about like going into the league and about the Super Bowl and that play? I know I've read about it, but I know our viewers would be interested in hearing it from the man himself.
Sure. Well, look, I won one game my junior year of college and one game my senior year of college. And then I get drafted by the Saints and we go 3-0 to start the preseason. And I said, well, this is pretty good. And we started off the regular season 13-0 that year. And it was a fairy tale. You know, it's hard to appreciate how good something is when you don't know any better. But it was kind of like, you know, Cheers. You know, we did the same thing every week and it was good every week. And after we won, we went to the same bar every week and that was good every week. And it just never got old. And we kind of took on the personality of the area, the city, and New Orleans likes to party. And so, you know, I think the way it is now is you wouldn't see that as much anymore. Guys are, you know, everything is taken into account: rest, recovery, nutrition, and we partied after every game. And we were out on Monday nights and Friday nights, but we did it with the city, and it was really a special time. And then as far as the onside kick ambush, that was really, you know, I don't remember actually doing the kick. Like I remember before it and after it. And obviously I've seen it on film, you know, hundreds of times, but you know, it was an awesome thing to do. Thank goodness it worked out. It was a huge risk, but statistically it wasn't a huge risk. You know, we needed to gain a possession. And at the time, with the rules at the time, getting an onside kick that was a surprise was about a 65% chance of getting it back. So it was actually a very calculated risk that the odds were in our favor. And it was a little more interesting than we thought it would be. It was a long pile up for the ball. And thank God for Chris Reese and Jonathan Casillas making the play to get the ball. And obviously we went down and had a huge drive to score, to take the lead. And we kind of just knew at that point that we weren't going to be denied. And, you know, how to describe the actual going into it, I was quite panicked. And, you know, I'd never kicked off until my rookie year, and I'd never done a surprise onside kick until that game. And I had a lot of negative thoughts when coach said we were actually going to run it at halftime. And I'm glad halftime was 30 minutes long. I had a chance to, you know, a chance to give myself a little psychological exam and, you know, get all my negative thoughts out. And by the time I got ready to go out for half, I just remember reminding myself of how I'd hit it in practice every time, and that, you know, coach wouldn't be calling on me to do this if he didn't think if I wasn't going to execute it. And I kind of was in a good mind space when we went out and did it. So glad it worked out. I've certainly hung on to that. You know, there's no more pressure feeling that I've ever felt in my career than that moment. And in times as a specialist, when you're not as confident as you'd like to be, you can kind of go back and draw on that, say, hey, you know, I've got the goods. I can, you know, there's no pressure that I can't stand up to, and just be able to kind of, sometimes you got to unrationally talk yourself into things to feel at your best. And so that's been helpful for my whole career.
Thomas, you touched on your career, so many great years with the Saints, a long established career, I suppose. Is there any unique stories outside of the Super Bowl you could tell us in particular around Sean Payton, his style of coaching, good or bad?
Well, I mean, I guess I could say, you know, one thing that is impressive about Coach, it doesn't mean you like it as a player, but, you know, it's kind of like he's kind of a master psychologist, if you will. He knows how to push buttons of different players, and he knows how to get the best out of players. And, you know, certain players he's easier on than others. And it took me a few years to figure out that, you know, sometimes when you get cussed out on the sideline, he knows you can handle that. And sometimes he thinks that's what you need to kind of get your ass moving a little bit. So, you know, I remember one of the proudest punts of my career was my rookie year in the NFC Championship game. It was 28-28, and we were punting with 2.5 minutes left to Brett Favre and the Vikings, and they had just moved the ball on us the whole game. And he grabbed me by the shoulder pads as I ran out on the field. I'm a rookie, mind you. And he turned me around. He said, "Give me some effing hang time," in a very demonstrative way. And I remember kind of being like, F that. Like, if I hit a short hang time punt here, like, they're going to be at midfield already. And so I just remember feeling like I need to hit my best ball here. And I certainly did. And we covered it. I think it was a 58-yard punt with a 53-yard net. And they got, you know, this close to being in field goal range, and they didn't. And they ended up passing on that last play, and Tracy Porter made the interception, went to overtime, won the game. So that was that's one of many, many times where coach has gotten after me in a different way. But he's a great psychologist of understanding what motivates players, and he knows how to push the right buttons.
Thomas, we actually spoke to Danny Woodhead, who told stories about Tom Brady chugging beers, and now with the story of the 13-0 Saints that year, we're imagining Drew Brees, Marcus Colston, all those guys enjoying themselves after the games. And certainly you mentioned Coach Payton and, you know, his passion. If I remember correctly, in that 2009 season, he slept with the Super Bowl trophy after you won the Super Bowl that night. So he probably had a good night that night and a bit of a party as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, he fell asleep. He fell asleep on the plane ride back after our party with it in his lap on the plane. I know that's that's an image I have ingrained in my mind for sure.
And Thomas, I hate to bring you to the downside of things, but you mentioned it was like a fairy tale that first season. You mentioned a great experience against Minnesota, obviously, in that famous NFC Championship game against Brett Favre. You then obviously had a number of years with the Saints where you never got to reach that promised land again, despite having a very talented roster, constantly being a playoff team, being a really strong team, great coach, great quarterback, great overall team generally. And one game that stands out, probably for the wrong reasons, of course, but for neutral fans, would, of course, be the Minnesota Miracle. And in many respects, you stand out to me in that game because if I remember correctly, you got injured even in during that game, making a tackle. But then the infamous touchdown occurs, and under the rules that existed at the time, which have now been changed, they still had to attempt the PAT or a 2-point conversion. And the Saints were back in the locker room. And you, along with only 9 people, if I remember correctly, came back on the field to de facto defend that extra point. I'm just wondering, you know, what drives you in that moment to kind of be that leader, almost the first one back on the field, of saying, okay, the last place you want to go is back out on that field. You did.
Yeah, look, I'll just take you through to kind of answer that. So I remember when it happened. So I'll go even further back. Will Lutz hit a great kick to put us up with like 25 seconds. We thought the game was over. I say we. And I remember somebody coming over to dap me up, and I've lost at the last second before when we thought we had it in the bag. And I refused the congratulations. I said, hey, hit me when it says zeros on the clock. And then lo and behold, they end up with a miracle play. And at the time, I was aware of the mandate to run that conversion. And so, I'm hanging out on the field wondering, when are they're going to do this. I know they're not going to let us walk off. So, and then I realized at some point, there's no one left on the field. I'm here. And I said, well, maybe they're not. So I kind of started back to the locker room, and I was kind of soaking it in. I think at that point, you play long enough, as crushing as it is, you kind of soak in whatever it is that's happening, because it's just no guarantee that you'll ever get to experience it again. So I remember kind of, I know this sounds crazy, kind of soaking in just the Vikings, the celebration, the crowd going crazy, and just the experience of it all. And I walked in, and right as I got to the locker room, the referees were running out saying, we need 11. And so I knew that they were not letting it go. And I remember looking in the locker room, and it looked like half the guys were in their towels already, ready to like shower. And I knew that there were a bunch of guys that were just, the game was over. And so I didn't even think twice about it. I mean, I didn't do it for any sort of notoriety or anything like that, but I was literally the last person that came in the locker room. They needed 11. So I just ran back out, and that was it. I didn't think it would turn into what it did. And I just went out there, and, I know Case Keenum, and so I'm running out, and he's sitting there doing this, the big Viking chant with the crowd. And he just said, hey, Thomas, we're going to take a knee. And I said, you better, because, I'm not exactly, a top tier defensive lineman here. So anyways, yeah, I just got out there, and I think we had 8 guys that came out, and, I'm glad they changed that rule, because there's really no reason to run the play. So.
We've just we've got another question each. Just Thomas, that's okay. I'm going to try and focus on what's on tomorrow night. Saints playing the Bills. Now, you actually the Saints played their first Thanksgiving game, correct me if I'm wrong, the year after you were drafted by the Saints. What's it like, obviously being a family man involved in the league, getting to spend Thanksgiving with your family, and then actually having to go and play a game on Thanksgiving? Did you enjoy it? I mean, is it that sort of one-off atmosphere, or do you prefer maybe sitting watching a few games like the Lions?
Look, I think look, I'm an optimist by nature, I think. And so, you take the good of what is in whatever the situation is, right? If we happen to play a game that's on, a short week that happens to be on Thanksgiving, it's like, hey, that all your friends and family are going to get to watch you play. And I'm going to have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off following Thanksgiving to hang with my family at home. So sometimes when people say, oh, that's crummy, you have to plan Christmas Day or something like that. Well, sometimes it actually is better if it's on a kind of not a Sunday, because you may get a little extra time that you wouldn't have otherwise. And so I always look forward to playing on a night game, because that means you're on national TV. And generally the atmosphere, no matter if you're playing at home or away, is just going to be a different level, kind of more of a playoff feel. And again, you go back to how many times am I going to get to do this? It's a great experience. And so I always look forward to that.
Thomas, I suppose with the Saints, you obviously have a special connection with the city, but when you left, I saw many pieces talking about how you were more than just a player. And obviously it was an enormous offseason, because Drew Brees, and another guy who meant so much to the city, moved on as well. You both phenomenal players for the Saints, both did incredible charity work through your foundations. And you mentioned earlier about what you didn't know what would become of going back out onto the field. And obviously the Vikings fans were so impressed they made that contribution to your foundation. But I'm wondering, could you talk to us a little bit, I suppose, about what it was like playing with somebody like Drew Brees, this kind of legendary quarterback?
Well, I don't know if this episode's long enough to answer that question, but I think anybody that played on our team for the time with Drew is indebted to Drew. He provided a great example. I came in, I think his ninth year was my rookie year. And so, I got kind of the physical top-notch part of his career as a young player. And as he continued to age and get more experience, I got a front row seat in what it takes to play at the highest level. As you maybe start to physically not have some of the tools. And I'm very grateful to Drew for that. And I think if you asked a lot of players that hung around and were smart enough to look around and, observe somebody that's just having the highest level of success, I think a lot of players would say that they're very grateful for Drew's example in that way. And I would say, look, I don't generally have a lot of physical contact in games being a specialist, but for most guys, really they're laying it on the line physically every week. And I think that's hard to do when deep down, you don't think you have a chance to win week in and week out. And I think when you had Drew as your quarterback, you just knew that you could win every game. And not only that, on the short term, you knew that you had a chance to get to the playoffs and you had a chance to maybe make a Super Bowl every year. And I think that lends itself to team success because guys are more willing to lay it on the line because they do know they have a legitimate shot and they know how precious that opportunity is. And so there's more value brought than just him and what he does. There's a lot of different ways that leaders like him raise the ceiling for everybody else. But, I think there's that. And I think all of the support staff, coaches, people in the building, there's lots of turnover in the league with staffs and firings and new hires. And he just, because of him and Coach Payton and Mickey, they provided a stable environment that everybody, if you did your job and you were reasonable and you really wanted to stick around and you weren't trying to just take every dollar you could, they provided an opportunity for not only players, but staff and people to have stable lives and to be a part of that kind of community. And look, I got 12 years in one team and I've been the highest paid player in the league for the past decade. I can't be more thankful for the entire experience. And I do attribute some of that to Drew.
Thomas, every season we have, I suppose, shocking results, but the past couple of weeks in particular, we've had numerous results that have kind of gone against the trend. What have you made of this season so far? It seems like it's for probably the first time in a long time, it's quite an open season in terms of who could potentially come out of the AFC and NFC.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think the parity is just awesome for the league. And I think deep down, if, I know you guys operate under some different sports systems over there, and shoot, we do over here as well. But man, any sports system that has parity in it is so good for the league. The viewership's great and it grows the game because it's the same teams not winning every week. And so I think it's fantastic, and I hope that continues because the more teams that are in it as the season goes, the more that's on the line for more teams, more fans are watching. It's just good for the game. And so another reason I know there's pro betting, just going crazy right now in the US. Man, that's a scary business to be in. If you, as soon as you think you got it figured out, you're wrong. So I'm sure there's been a lot of roller coaster rides for a lot of fans that are new to the betting scene.
I don't know if you saw last weekend, some guy in Vegas had 250K on the Chiefs minus 2.5 points.
Wow. Hey, I see stuff like that on social media every week with somebody had this. It'll be either somebody that thought they had a shoe in on something for a lot of money or somebody that placed a $5 bet on some ridiculous parlay that hit. And so, it's like all the other things like that. All you hear about is the big losses and the most of unlikely wins. But it is kind of interesting. Keep an eye on.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't had the same restrictions on gambling on sports in Europe or in Ireland, so we know the joys and the pains of that all too well, Thomas. Especially the losses, I would say.
Yep.
But very quickly, Thomas. I mean, look, you're still a young man. Obviously, you had a small period of time with the Jets. This time earlier on this year, your playing career, I wouldn't say is done necessarily. And I'm sure the desire is still there, but you're definitely towards the end of your career. And I suppose I'm curious, like, what does the future hold? I mean, if I think of special teams coaches have been NFL head coaches: Joe Judge, Bill Belichick, John Harbaugh. Your old long-term special teams coach, Greg McMahon's obviously still active with LSU. Or do you want to be a media darling and superstar like another punter in Pat McAfee?
Wow, that's a lot of different ways I could go here. I do not want to be Pat McAfee. I'm very happy for his success. The guy works his ass off. He's incredibly talented and very, very intelligent. And he will be wildly, wildly successful for the rest of his life. Whatever he's doing, he goes all in. And I'm very happy for him. I think I would be a good coach at some point. I'm probably in that ballpark of people that says there's no way I'm ever coaching currently. The amount of time these guys spend away from their families, I don't think is something that I would be willing to do. And so I'm not sure what I'll end up doing. I'm definitely starting to experience a little bit of ageism in the league. I've been the second most productive punter via punt runs this season in my stint with the Jets. And I'm going to continue to stay ready. I feel good physically. I definitely had a drop off last year, had an injury and an eye issue that have both been remedied. But I felt like I was hitting on all cylinders up in New York. It was a great experience for me. It was healing in a way to go up and validate to myself that I can still do this at a very, very high level. And they were great to me. They communicated the whole time that, hey, this is a fill-in for Braden Mann, and Braden and I are buddies. There was no hard feelings getting released. I knew it was coming. And in fact, I got twice as long as I thought I was going to get. So I think they were excited to have me doing so well and, showing some leadership in a very young locker room that they have up there.
Thomas, you're a gentleman, and we wish you all the very, very best over the next few weeks and months and the future. And hopefully, I'm sure it'll all work out. It'll be good to see you. Hopefully, maybe get back in the field again next season. Final question for me, very quickly: what was it like playing at Tottenham? Did you enjoy it? I mean, for us sitting in the stands, the stadium's crazy, and the Jets fans really brought it in that game. The atmosphere was crazy.
Yeah, look, I think I've experienced Jets and Giants enough to. The Jets fans have a little more blue collar nature to them, and they are. There's a lot that I've experienced it already playing up there in New Jersey. I mean, it was loud in the games that we were in, and they are all about it. So it was very cool to play for that fan base. And look, I certainly have a unique relationship with going over there, with my family being over there. My parents live in London, and the opportunity to play in London in front of my family, which what I thought was going to be my last game with the Jets and against the Falcons, was like, you can't write that script any better, So unfortunately we didn't get it done, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I always love visiting over there. I'll have to come visit you guys. My wife and I will be in Ireland next summer, so maybe we'll link up and do something. We're coming over for a wedding, and I think we're going to come spend a good amount of time over there visiting my family in England as well as being in Ireland. So we'll have to link up.
Absolutely, we'd be delighted to welcome you and your family. And Thomas, you're wondering about what the future holds. Maybe you'll follow Philip Rivers' route and go into high school coaching. I know he wanted to spend more time with his kids, so that might be an option. But just want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the Irish NFL Show, and wish you the very, very best for the future.
All right, thank you guys. I enjoyed it.
And the blowout continues. It's another touchdown. What a huge play at this point in the game. Breaks the tackle now with Allen. Fighting through, and he's got space. He will score. Touchdown. And the blowout continues. It's another touchdown. What a huge play at this point in the game. Breaks the tackle now with Allen. Fighting through, and he's got space. He will score. Touchdown.
And that has been, well, that's all our guests on the Irish NFL Show for Thanksgiving. A day of friends, tradition, family, football. No Emmerdale, no Coronation Street, Brian, but 3 games. Delighted to, I guess, now presented by Matchbook Betting Exchange, our sponsors, Code Irish NFL Show. Look ahead to these 3 games on Thanksgiving. But Colin, first off, great show today.
Look, the stellar lineup. Absolutely thrilled to be joined by the guests that we have. Some returning guests, some new faces, but we're really thrilled. It's obviously a huge day in the United States. It's a day I think we all mark. But if you're an NFL fan, you always mark it in your calendar. Probably even bigger for me, given that all my in-laws are in the States, and this is the time of the year when I'm generally over here anyway. But I think for NFL fans all over the world, this is a day you keep an eye on, because you know that there is going to be games throughout the day. And also, I know Brian is going to be making his way to the Woolshed. I've spent many a Thanksgiving in the Woolshed as well. It's always a great spot. So there will be NFL fans enjoying this all over the world, and delighted we can have a special show to celebrate.
And Brian, obviously, there's been a massive Thanksgiving tradition with the NFL for many's a year. In fact, on Thanksgiving in 1925, the Bears played the Chicago Cardinals. Were you at that game? Do you remember it at all, or am I just overstepping the mark?
No, I'm not that old, unfortunately.
I'm so sorry. I couldn't help myself. But anyway, it's good crack.
Your time will come, Michael. Unfortunately, by the time your time comes, I'll be retired. But look, we get to talk about 3 games now, and it was funny this week. I've seen a number of people say, when are the Lions going to be removed from this Thanksgiving tradition? Because unfortunately, year in, year out, the game itself doesn't seem to be too enticing. But what I find is in Thanksgiving, and your column is right, when the schedule comes out in April, May these days, you look at Thanksgiving, you know it's the Lions, but you always know, in fact, it's 3 standalone games on the day, and you can't argue with that, because once we watch Red Zone and various games throughout the season, it's nice to have an unusual day in a way to watch 3 games, 6 teams, and some of which will have playoff implications. Not the first one, the other two will. And as for the show itself, look, great show. It's brilliant to put a Thanksgiving show together like this, and we were very fortunate to have some great guests on, some ex-players, some media people, and as Colin said, some return to the show. But look, we've got to set our lineup. Thankfully, we've got to set our lineup, and hopefully we get 3 great games, which we're going to talk about now.
Absolutely. And the games you're talking about, the triple header, features 3 teams currently in playoff position and 4 teams of a .500 or better winning percentage. Recording this live at the time, hoping that Mark Cockrell's going to send through his picks. Let's see if he does or not. Let's go to the first game. The Bears 3-7, losing to the Ravens on Sunday. Colin, you were in Soldier Field, going up at Detroit Lions 0-9-1. I'll start with you, Colin. Can the Lions get a win on Thanksgiving? Because I think after the few weeks that we've had, that would literally take the biscuit. And we're presuming at the minute, we're not too sure upon the time of recording, who's starting the quarterback. Will we see Andy Dalton? Because will Justin Fields clear the concussion protocol or the ribs or whatever is going on? I've literally got confused. He does not currently have a concussion.
No,
Maybe I did.
He has a rib injury, though. Matt Nagy wasn't sure if it was the result of one hit or a cumulative kind of rib injury. So just the punishment he was taking. And in fairness, Andy Dalton took a shot on the TD pass he threw out towards the end of the game as well. He showed massive cojones to stay in and take it, I thought. But the question for the Lions is, will Jared Goff be fit? Obviously, the backup Boyle comes in at the weekend. It sounds like he probably has Irish heritage given the name, but he threw for, I think, 77 yards, if I'm not mistaken. That was the stat I saw. So, yeah, I think that they probably want Jared Goff back in. I thought that the Bears were okay on Sunday. I didn't think they were terrible. They were okay. I think they have issues. Obviously, the head coach is probably the biggest issue that they have. But I think that they have some, solid players on defense, particularly in that third quarter. They were excellent. On Sunday, they swarmed the Ravens. They were good in the secondary. They were good at getting to the passer. And I think that they'll probably, be able to do that against the Lions team that, as Brian pointed out on our Monday night show, they're struggling, and their head coach is beginning to make some kind of baffling decisions. You would think that they would want to win a game, which still you feel wouldn't threaten their opportunity to pick number 1 in the draft. But he's making some baffling calls. It must be very tough for everyone involved with the Lions right now. I'm in Michigan as we record this, so plenty of Lions fans around. Nobody with anything good to say about the franchise. It is truly the factory of sadness, and I think that is likely to continue for them. I think that the Bears will get the win in the Thanksgiving game. It's probably unlikely to be a classic. It starts here at 12:30, so it'll be over early afternoon. And I think that there will probably be better games over the course of the day and over the course of the season. But I have the Bears winning this one.
For all the faults of the Lions, Colin's called out. I was quite critical of their head coach on our Monday show. And they played well on defense for a large stretch of the season. But unfortunately, those performances seem to come on the road. In the last 2 weeks, they've been on the road. They drew that game in Pittsburgh, and the defense played well, and they got some takeaways. And last weekend, again, they had takeaways on Baker Mayfield. But when they play at home, and people kind of get a little bit of an expectation that this might be the time in which they win, they seem to get blown out. The Eagles did it. People touched on it earlier in the season when the 49ers put a beat down on them and they came back a little bit, but that game was well and truly over at that stage. So they haven't performed to the extent at home. But in saying that, this Bears team haven't impressed by and large this season. Like 2 weeks ago, a couple of weeks back in Pittsburgh, everybody was kind of argumentative by the poor decision which the referees did, as opposed to how poorly the Bears played for large parts of that game. They didn't do they had a great opportunity the weekend to beat a Ravens team without their main quarterback, and they couldn't get it done. You know, some of the Bears fans are disgruntled by the manner in which the defeat happened in the end. I think the Lions are going to win a game this season. It has to be. They won't get a better opportunity because I don't believe. Again, at time of recording, we're not entirely sure whether Justin Fields will play. There's two arguments. Like it's only when we say it's only a rib injury, it could have been a lot worse. He could have broken ribs. But is it too soon to bring him back in Sunday to Thursday? And we've seen in the past, Andy Dalton is the kind of quarterback that will play well when he steps in, like he did last year for Dallas. But when he's asked to go and perform in the game consistently for the 60 minutes, he doesn't do it. I'm going to go with the shock. I'm going to pick the Lions. Even at this stage, not knowing who's going to be the quarterback, I think defensively they might do enough to stifle this Bears offense. That's been sporadic at the best times of the season. We haven't seen the Allen Robinson, this season that we saw last year. They haven't won it's been a while since the Lions have actually won on Thanksgiving as well. I'm going to go with the shock. I don't know why I have a sneaking feeling the Lions find a way to win this game.
Oh, right. Well, Mark's going with the Lions as well. So do I go with the Lions with the crack? No, I don't. Going on what you said about Justin Fields, are obviously at the time of recording. Sorry, folks, but I mean, this takes a lot to record and stuff, etc. But time of recording, Matt Nagy's not, as you said, not ruling out broken ribs for Justin Fields. Justin Fields is not playing on Thursday. There is no chance in hell that's going to happen. And because of that, they're going to win the game. Andy Dalton's going to have a great game. He came on Sunday and scored, he scored 2 second-half touchdowns of 49 and 60 yards. I like Darnell Mooney. I like Marquise Goodwin. I think the Bears will have enough to get over the Lions. That being said, though, I do think it'll be a close game. I can see DeAndre Swift, who had a really good game, 130-odd yards on Sunday. Is it going to be Tim Boyle against Andy Dalton? Do we deserve that? Will I be watching Tipping Point instead? No. But look, it could happen. That could be the situation. I think Chicago will just about have enough. I think it might be an entertaining game. It's the third time in 4 years the Bears are going into Thanksgiving with an emergency quarterback situation.
Your point about the game being close is reflective in price, and once we're discussing the game, Matchbook, obviously, our partners will have provided the odds in this game, and at the time of recording, the Lions are plus 3.5 point favorites. So it is tight enough. They are expecting a close game. The bookies are, not sure in terms of where this game is going to go, which is reflective of the point that we think this one could be tight. And if the Lions are to pull this off, and it will be a shock if they do it, I think that pretty much rubber stamps Matt Nagy's existence as the Chicago Bears head coach. He's probably gone anyway, but if they were to lose this game, we spoke recently about our head coach that potentially could go during the season. You'd wonder if the Bears would make that jump now and start getting a shoe into getting people in ahead of the curve.
Nagy's at the wheel, eh? Nagy's at the wheel. Okay, tell me how good does it feel? Are we going to do a wee bet with Matchbook for Thanksgiving? Is that happening, Brian? TBC?
If you're asking me what the bet on this game should be, I would be going with the under. I believe the under is at 43.5 points in the game. 44, I don't expect a high-scoring game. Similar to a lot of games of the weekend where we were looking at how high the over was, for example, 50 points in Kansas City. We felt it would go under. It did. This game could go touch it. Where it goes in terms of the victory is irrelevant if you're backing the total points. I think under 43.5 points.
There's more chance of the Birdie Bowl being built than there is of that game getting over 43.5 points. I mean, are we doing an ACA with Matchbook? No, on Thursday? No, or are we waiting to the weekend?
Yeah, but the problem is we've got a mixed opinion on the game.
We'll come back. We'll come back. Vegas 5-5 at the Cowboys 7-3. Dallas losing against Kansas City on Sunday. Need to pick up perform column. The Raiders losing to the Bengals. A lot of the Irish and UK fans, both Raiders and Bengals. I've seen that over in Vegas on Sunday. Probably disappointed Raiders fans, but a chance for the Raiders to really put a stamp down on a Cowboys team with a few injuries.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think this is a game where both teams are probably not going to be at full strength because we're at that point of the season. But I had thought that the Cowboys would lose at Arrowhead because I thought that it was going to be difficult for them because they were going to have an eye on Thursday. I mean, the Cowboys always play on Thanksgiving, and it's always such a big event. I mean, I don't know, I certainly remember Zeke jumping into the Salvation Army bucket back in his rookie year when he seemed absolutely unstoppable. And yeah, the Cowboys have all sorts of injury issues, but the Raiders just have issues across the board. And I think that while you can overcome one major incident and it might bring the team together, I think two major incidents involving a player and involving a head coach, it's very, very difficult to come together as a team after that. And it's not the fault of anyone on the roster right now, the actions of John Gruden and Henry Ruggs. So you have to have some sympathy for the franchise and for the players that are there, because they, John Gruden and Henry Ruggs have to own their actions. And obviously, you cannot say anything about either of them, but it has caused huge issues for the Raiders. And I think that is one of the things that's really affecting them. It looks like they're playing almost kind of hungover, and we've seen Derek Carr come out and say, like, to put it on him, and I think he's trying to be a leader. But I think that this is a Cowboys team who, I've said it before, are very emotional. I think that they respond at times to bad performances, but I think they're also prone to going in and being very flat. I think this is a game where they'll be up for it because of what happened at Arrowhead. I think that the Cowboys will have enough to overcome the Raiders. It could be a game where both teams score points, and I know the Cowboys are beat up, but I do think that Dak will be much better than he was on Sunday night.
Yeah. CeeDee Lamb looks like he's all pretty much ruled out because of the concussion on Sunday. It's too quick a turnaround to get himself back and cleared for the protocol. And then Cooper, the other wide receiver, who's obviously on the COVID list, looks like he potentially could come back. So again, there's a few unknowns going into this game. But at the same time, reflecting on a couple of games where the Raiders have played recently, played against the Giants 3 weeks ago, and Devontae Booker went up and down the field on them, and the Giants continuously went with the run game. And similar enough on Sunday, we saw in Vegas where the Bengals used Joe Mixon to, he's a quality running back anyway, but ultimately they used the exact same kind of playbook. Let's just run all over this Raiders defense. They're one of the weakest run defenses in the league. And whilst the Cowboys might be struggling offensively in terms of wide receivers, they've got Elliott and they got Pollard. And I think if they mix it up between the two of them, they'll be able to go up and down the field all night long on this Raiders defense. And I think they'll find themselves in nice red zone opportunities, and that's where you bring tight ends into play, such as Schultz and stuff. So I think whilst they might be out with wide receivers, I think they'll still do enough to put quite a number of points up on this Raiders defense. And for the Raiders offense, I mean, for an offense to start the season so aggressively and explosive, 30 odd points against the Ravens, similar enough in games thereafter, it just hasn't materialized. And you can put a lot of that down to the, as Colin alluded to, the off the field antics of certain people. But ultimately, the team is what we've seen in the past. They start the season well, they hit a certain point in the season, and the second half season they tend to go away and they end up with a negative losing record. So for me, I think this is a great game for the Cowboys to come back off a difficult defeat in Arrowhead last Sunday, get themselves back on track. Cowboys will win and be, I think, reasonably high scoring game. I think it'll be a decent enough game. I think the Raiders will hang in there till half time, but ultimately I think in the end the Cowboys will pull away and win comfortably enough.
We can talk about America's team and we can talk about the reputation of some teams, but Cowboys on Thanksgiving, the pressure's on them. Jerry Jones will expect a win here, and not just a win, like get over the line win. He'll want the Cowboys to win comfortably. I think they will. I think the Cowboys will do what they've done against the Falcons. I really do, which I hope doesn't happen as a neutral, because that's the game where we're the most awake, especially after that Lions-Bears game. Do you know what I mean? We need a good game in the middle. I think the Cowboys are going to walk over the Raiders. I can see, as you said, Brian, that combination of Pollard and Elliott doing really well. But more so that defense. Like talking about Micah Parsons, he had 2 sacks, a forced fumble on Sunday. He looks so good. And I'm interested to see if Amari Cooper does play or doesn't play it. Staying different, guys. Is it Wilson, for example? The amount of drop passes he had on Sunday in Kansas
Wilson,
City.
yeah.
So
Second year
there's
in the
nowhere to
league.
hide it in Dallas on Thanksgiving, is it? But I'm taking the Cowboys to win. So
Yeah, I
yes.
was just going to make a point. Yeah, I get this. There isn't like, was it still a regular season game? And we touched on it earlier on when we were discussing the Lions game and discussing Thanksgiving. 3 standalone games. The expectations on the Cowboys on Thanksgiving is huge. Last year they lost at home to Washington football team when a lot of people felt they would have won that game and potentially went on to challenge for the division. And a couple of years back, a similar enough scenario where they played a team from the AFC West. The Chargers went into Dallas, and at the time when Philip Rivers was the quarterback, and put a beat down on them. And sometimes they just don't tend to perform on Thanksgiving. I don't know what it is, whether it's just they're unfortunate against the team which they're playing, or just the expectations of that day and the fact that our home is too much for them. But in this game, bearing in mind where the Raiders are at this stage of the season, I think we won't see that happen in this game. Tomorrow, I think we'll find that the Cowboys win comfortably.
Final game, Buffalo 6-4 against the New Orleans Saints 5-5 in the Superdome, or as Hulk Hogan calls it, the Silverdome. I'm not sure what it's called anymore, but we'll see the crack. New Orleans leads the all-time series against the Bills 7-4. And in weeks 10 of the 2017 season, they beat them 47-10. The Bills need a win, Colin. By God, they need a win after Sunday. Will they get one against New Orleans in the Sunday night football, Thursday night football, late night? I presume we're all going to watch this game tomorrow, yeah? I'm going to watch it, 100%.
Well, I'm in the fortunate position of it being time for me. So yes, I remember last year watching the Saints and Alvin Kamara run all over the Minnesota Vikings. It was really what
4 touchdowns, wasn't it, Colin? Yeah, 4.
Yeah, well, it was more 6. Yeah, it Jonathan Taylor-esque performance. I mean, everything Kamara touched that night was absolute gold, and just watching it was kind of jaw-dropping. It was, I'm getting my holidays mixed up. That was Christmas. I was
the late game last year on Thanksgiving was cancelled because of COVID.
Yes, I was putting the Saints. I knew it was a holiday game, but I was going with the wrong one. But yes, equally, Kamara did run all over the Vikings, but it's unlikely that he plays in this game. Certainly, the latest I've seen was that he would have been limited or did not participate if the Saints had been training. Obviously, this week on a short week, that's not going to be the case. They're just going to do walkthroughs. So I think that's a huge loss for the Saints. And look, Trevor Siemian is not an NFL a starter, right? He can come in and in relief, but he can't start. He has he's been an albatross for the Saints. For the Bills, I think what comes to mind, and we talked about it on Monday's show, was the running game. Brian, you highlighted the issues that they've had, and I'm wondering if maybe they could, because I know he's suspended now, bring in the Detroit Pistons center Isaiah Stewart. If anyone saw him breaking loose and making a beeline for LeBron James with all sorts of bodies hanging off of him. He looked like Javonte Williams on one of his angry runs. Maybe the Bills could bring him in to sort out the line. I think the good news for the Bills defense that gave up, and we talked about this is a Bills defense that were number 1 statistically in the league, but they gave up 45 points to the Colts. The Saints are struggling. This isn't the Saints of old. And I think that for that reason, the Bills will have enough, will get back on track with a victory. I have no doubt. Look, we talked about it. Sean Payton is a wonderful coach. He'll make it tough. He'll make it difficult. But I think he is hamstrung by the sheer number of injuries that the Saints have, particularly at QB. Doesn't matter what you have around him. If you don't have a QB, you don't have anything in this league.
Ryan, the Mark's going with the Cowboys. I should have said.
Yeah.
My bad.
So we're all full house there. a month ago, Dennis Allen put a really good scheme in place for the Saints defense when the Bucks came to town into the dome, and everybody raved how well performance was. They still gave up 27 points in that game, and it was a very high scoring game. And the Saints put up points on a Bucks defense which was struggling at that time, and that's probably the only game which Simeon has really performed. And we've touched on the reason why we felt that was because he came into the game, and the Bucks wouldn't have schemed on him leading up to that game. What we've seen of late is what we've come to expect of that quarterback, and this scenario is different because at the time the Bucks defense wasn't playing well, and this Bills defense, with the exception of last weekend, have been playing very well, and they'd only given up 6 passing touchdowns prior to last weekend. Yes, Jonathan Taylor ran all over when he scored 4 touchdowns, and if Kamara was playing, you could argue 2 similar type of running backs, and he will have a day against this Bills defense, but he's not going to play. It's unlikely he's going to play. So for me, I can't see how this run game for the Saints will do enough. I think the Bills defense in particular will rebound off a difficult loss, and Josh Allen will have a day. The Saints secondary is very good on the stage. They've got their players, but ultimately I think the Bills will put up enough points, and I just can't see the Saints being able to live with them offensively. So for me, Bills get a rebound win similar enough to what they got recently when they came off that difficult loss against the Jacks. They rebounded well against the Jets the following week. Then they lost last weekend against the Colts. I think they'll rebound there, get their season back on track. And for the Saints, season that started well, looked like they were going in the right path, is gradually starting to go back to what ultimately I think a lot of us expected at the start of the season.
Mark is going with the Bills. I am going with the Saints. I think Trevor Simeon's going to have a day. We're talking about emotion with Dallas. There's emotion in New Orleans. Drew Brees, one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the sport, walked off to an empty or majorly empty stadium last year, and he will be remembered for the player he was and the pundit that he is on Thursday night on NBC. I think the stadium's going to be popping. I've got Trevor Simeon, who has won a Super Bowl ring. Let's not forget it. I'm taking that. The whole albatross comment, but I've got Trevor Simeon going for 3 passing touchdowns, Callaway 2 passing or 2 receiving touchdowns, and the Saints win by a field goal and panic sets in Buffalo. That's my upset of the day, and I have to do that or else I'll go to bed. So that is my big upset of the day. I think Trevor Simeon, the Northwestern boy, is going to come good, boys. I want him to. He deserves to after his...
If that happens, the happiest man in the world will be one William Belichick.
He will indeed. And I think that is what's going to happen. Let's see what happens. That's it for the show. I can't believe we've got through that. If you've been sticking with us for the last 2 or 3 hours, really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the guest. It's been a great experience. And yeah, it's been a great Irish NFL show. Really appreciate everybody coming on, taking part, getting comments in. Boys, want to thank you. Want to thank Marco. I want to thank Marco. I want to thank Mark as well. He's not here. But I want to wish all of you boys a happy Thanksgiving, a happy Thursday to me and Brian. And well, Brian, enjoy your Thanksgiving. You're getting the turkey down at the Wolfe. Colin, happy Thanksgiving to you. Your wife, Rhea, and her family as well. Please pass on our best. And to everybody watching, Ireland, US, UK, Europe, the moon, wherever, happy Thanksgiving. We'll see you at the weekend for week 12 of the NFL season. Enjoy the games. Get the